Namaste and greetings. I, Ramanathan, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav एवं नीति अनुसंधान संस्थान नई दिल्ली, extend my warmest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. Today, we are gathered here for day 3 of Gender and Mental Health, a 3-day immersive online certificate training course. We are in the last day of this 3-day program, which is dedicated to understanding the integrate interplay between gender dynamics and mental well-being. On day 3, we will be joined by Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor IMPRI, Dr. Varudhini Kankipati ji, director and co-founder Interconnect, counselor at National Academy of Legal Studies and Research, University of Hyderabad, and Ms. Sangeeta Rege, Director of Sehat, visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI. The chair for the program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting Distinguished Professor at IMPRI. The panel of conveners comprises of Professor Gumadi Sridevi ji, Professor, School of Economics at University of Hyderabad, visiting Professor IMPRI, Dr. Simmi Mehta ji, CEO and Editorial Director IMPRI, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji, Director IMPRI. Proceeding further, I welcome all the participants to this enlightening deliberation and thank you for being interested and putting your time, energy, and effort into understanding the interplay between gender and mental health. Now, without any further ado, let us start our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite the chair of the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Welcome, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Raman. And for this introduction, today we are in the concluding day, day 3 of the online International Winter School program and a 3-day immersive online certificate training course on gender and mental health. Thank you, Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Dr. Vaishali Singh, Dr. Matarora, and Ms. Vidita for putting this course together. And what all has transpired in the previous 6 sessions, I think it was most mind-boggling problems faced by citizens in post-pandemic period, where the decision-making on a day-to-day life, livelihood, for self-dependence and career, they have been affected drastically. So this is the macro reality within which we are trying to understand gender implications of mental health. So rapid changes in socio-economic and cultural reality, societal expectations, values and norms, cutthroat competition, pressure during examination for the young adults, breakdown of traditional family structures which were earlier providing the emotional solace, they have also eroded. And these are the factors which accelerate the alarming trend of mental health challenges. Examination related to anxiety, resulting in a sharp rise in youth hurting themselves deliberately, leaving homes and killing themselves. In last 1 week, you must have known how many students have committed suicide. Extremely bright students who had gone to Kota for their preparation of their for their competitive exams, their lives have been lost. Now, this is the situation in which we need to do tremendous soul searching and understand how the support services are functioning, and about which most of all our previous speakers yesterday and day before yesterday enlightened us. The fear of failure is a major root cause of all qualms, whether within the family or at the workplace or among the friend circles and peers. So large number of students and their parents, homemakers are also now seeking professional help when they are stressed. Consulting psychiatrists is no longer a taboo in the psychiatric response to cries for the help, for the crippling academic burden that students are facing or the youth are facing because of massive unemployment and feeling socially dislocated because of the no sense of self-worth, which perennial non-employment gives. So according to them, we have more problems. Like if we see that the psychiatrists say that we have more problem parents than problem children. Providing good and healthy role models is extremely important. Parents who want their children to develop inside high self-esteem should make a point of treating them with respect and dignity. Yesterday, Professor Anuradha Sovani told her that how, while counseling, she realized that she needs to locate low self-esteem in also the overall reality of sex-selective abortion. That means girls are not wanted. If this is the mentality of the family members, how, surviving daughters, surviving children, they will also get the message. So another thing is of a fiscal hygiene, which is important. Currently, we are in a consumerist society, so that also has caused lot of pressure on children to live up to certain standards, or the whole obsession about branding. Even if when you get a nice, better quality stuff outside, you would pay 10 times more. And what makes you do that is so we need to have this even the romantic oh my God. 1 minute, huh? I'll just okay, I'm just yeah. So and this kind of oh my God, I have yes. So these are the multifaceted problems that we are facing, and we discussed the storytelling by all the previous resource persons, and also conceptual clarity, demystification of psychological and psychiatric terminologies that was provided by the experts. I think was very, very useful, and it also how you also entreat the discussion by participating actively in the discussion. So with that, I think now we can start our last day. Thank you, Rahman. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for introducing the program to us today. I would now like to call you again. So I would like to call Professor Vibhuti Patel ji again for an address on mental health and well-being, a right-based approach. Over to you.
Yeah, I will stick to my time limit because I have also spoken earlierly about many of the ideas which I'm going to discuss in the right-based perspective. Yeah. So when we talk about gender and mental health, yeah. So I think as our previous speakers also told that what the consciousness raising or the sharing of experiences or problems and feelings and dreams in a collective way and helping each other, that has been the major input of the right-based perspective. And other thing is that I'm getting terribly disturbed by 1 minute, huh? By this thing is just not closing. Okay, yeah. So what women's movement has taught us that we need to create an atmosphere which is non-threatening, because the moment you have a threatening environment, you withdraw, you stop speaking. A non-power oriented atmosphere is also very important to make people trust each other. And that is what is very important. And that helps you to overcome false consciousness. Whatever problems or phobia or complexes you have, you can shed them in a sympathetic, empathetic environment. And overall influence of that is empowerment. The way depression manifests in different ways, I think so many practicing psychiatrists and psychologists yesterday, they discussed that what are the kind of depressive tendencies and how it manifests. And there are two approaches. One is a biomedical approach, which believes in giving you more of a medication, chemical therapy, and electroconvulsive therapy, or drugging you. And other is a psychosocial approach, which tries to locate the root cause of depression in a psychological and social setting, and how those disabling factors can be dealt with. So the coping mechanism and patient herself or the himself, person who is suffering, they also cope with their stress either by crying or talking to the colleagues and friends and neighbors and family members if they are ready to listen, or so many of them pray, because that also we have seen that when you are very anxious or very disturbed, you also resort to praying. So many elderly people, they do that. They get their solace by praying, and collectively also. not only alone, but engaging in a creative work. It's very therapeutic, whether you do pottery or embroidery or create something which is appeasing to your eyes and taste buds and flavor, a nice flavor, nice visual appeal, that also acts as a therapeutic. And team building is very important, because you know that you are not alone in your suffering. There are people around you. And community work, so many times you're working because I live just in front of orphanage, and also there is a multi-purpose support services which this campus provides. And I see that so many women who were earlier working in a multinational company, and they had a good, they are highly educated women. They were earning 5-figure, 6-figure salaries. And when they got married and they had children, they gave up their job. And they nearly gave best years of their lives, 10 to 15 years of their life, for child rearing. And now the children are big. They have no time to speak to this mother who is always talking about the domestic issues. When husband would find her boring, because she is not the earlier bubbly person who used to work and used to share so many varied experiences. Now, the emptiness which is created among these educated women, in fact, that was the reason why the women's movement rose in the 70s. It was the educated middle-class white women of a post-war Europe and America who got bored, because after marriage they gave up their career as either it's a journalist or teacher or professional or banker. And the feeling of purposelessness or a role-lessness can create tremendous identity crisis and loss of self-esteem. So when you do community work, you feel that you are wanted, your life is worth it, no? So that also is very therapeutic. Now, psychological stages, as I told you yesterday also, that there are stages in which you try to cope with your most of us have gone through this, so I don't think it is just articulating it, because when you see that you in your life also, you would see the same, that initially the moment immediately when you face the crisis, first of all you put up, you are desert, no, you are sometimes there is a paralysis, that how can such thing happen. That's what we have seen while counseling women women from who are suffering from dowry harassment. They said, I never expected such thing could ever happen. Even those who read newspapers, who were well informed, who married relatively late, when they were 28, 29, 30, they had experience of doing paid work also for 7-8 years. And they said, I just could not understand how to respond. So you endure your taunts and whatever harassment and the neglect, and then you suffer, and you start gloat in your suffering. Then you reckon with the situation, and then you may reconcile, because when you see that there is no other alternative, your parents have said, okay, your dolly has gone and only your earthy can come. So if that is the kind of atmosphere in your parental family, you would reconcile with this insulting behavior. You saw this process in Thappad. You saw the Thappad film, no? Okay, that's all, whole cycle has been shown. You normalize, and then you realize, no, I can't put up with such situation. You may try to look out for an alternative. And successful completion of therapeutic cycle depends on how conducive the physical or emotional systems are. And they are totally dependent on the material reality. Do you have supportive friend? Do you have sympathetic colleagues? Do you have people, friends or neighbors who would stand by you? Then the alternatives to get out of that situation are much easier. Sometimes even hysteria can also open up. While working in the bastis, we realize that if mother-in-law tortures daughter-in-law continuously, and then daughter and she uses this whole mata ana, because hysteria also, they said that Devi has come, no? There are film also made by Satyajit Ray on Devi. Okay, so when you don't get your rights, or when you don't get your entitlements, when you don't get, what do? You become subversive. So we were in Basti, where a woman, she said she Devi had come in her soul, and Devi was demanding jalebi. So everyone got scared, and they started looking out for jalebi. and Devi ate jalebi. That means she ate jalebi. Okay, she was, and while we talked about it, so why Devi asked for only jalebi? And later on, she says, I'm pregnant and I want to eat some nice. In my family, nobody cares for me. Nobody gives me anything. And this hysteria helped her to get what she wanted. Or in a tremendous, like extremely oppressive and restricted situation, we have seen hysteria. We saw women, young girls in free trade zones in Sri Lanka. Okay, one girl would say that there is a ghost in the factory, because these are the girls who were made to work for 12 to 16 hours a day. They were not even allowed to go to the loo if they wanted. Lunch break was hardly 10-15 minutes. An extremely oppressive assembly line situation. You know, assembly line. In assembly line, each one has to coordinate the work. Even if one person defaults, then whole assembly line is broken, and there would be the supervisors who are watching you on CCTV, they would punish you, and the penalty would be quite high, not only in terms of reduction in wages. So we have seen in so many countries of Asia, young women workers, whether they worked in a Levi's shoes company or in a Wrangler and all the multinational brands, where they subcontract their work to the developing country. In Asia, during 80s, 90s, and even now, is a hub for manufacturing work, because Asian girls are brought up under tremendous discipline, whether it is Hinduism or Islam or Confucius ideology. These girls, they are trained to sacrifice, not to back answer, to obey the adults, obey the authority. So this is the kind of socialization Asian girls have. And that's why these manufacturing hubs have come up. And plus, Asian girls have a basic skills of, even 5-year-old girl can also take up needle and do needlework. Okay, so we have seen it in a child. So these girls had to work under tremendous oppressive situation, and they use hysteria for what they wanted, that there was a ghost, and all of them get out of the factory, and they said, unless you have some puja or unless you have some ritual and satisfy the ghost. And then they say that the ghost was demanding that each factory worker should be given, say, coffee at 11 a.m. Okay, so they said, okay, otherwise we will not work, because unless you appease the ghost, we will not work. So we have seen that anthropologists and ethnographers have also shown how hysteria also opens up more opportunities for those who have been completely subjugated and controlled. And it also increases their freedom and space with added cost, because there is an added cost, because if the employers have to give whatever, like snacks and food and time to rest, because that's what the ghost is demanding, that this girl should be given time to rest. They should be allowed to go to for their natural call. So all that chatter of demand, they would put it in the mouth of a ghost. And they said that unless management agrees with that, we will not. And now it is a question of belief. It is a question of faith. Now, about that, not much negotiation can take place. If people have a faith in ghost, what would the employer do? No. So we have seen that in a different cultures, you see this kind of practices also become a subversive way of getting more freedom and space. I told you about ethic approach, which was a universalist approach. Most of the studies which were done during the colonial times about Africans, about Asians, about Latinos, about those who were colonized and who were made slaves, all of them were with the ethic approach. And as I think our Cicilia madam also, yesterday Professor Dr. Cicilia also told us, this one, Archana madam also told us that this universalist approach, they have a certain model of the Western white people, Anglo-Saxon people's lifestyle. And think about that. You have also that there have been cases where Asian parents have been punished because the child is sleeping with the parents. Now, child sleeping with the parents is not a crime. This is how we grew up. We all slept with our parents, no? But in their culture, it is not. Child is separated. from parents right from the early childhood. And this is and on the basis of which, if they say the parents are deviant, then they get punished. We also saw the film recently, I think, about how the Norwegian government tried to penalize a Bengali lady with 2 children, and she fought in the and it became a big issue, diplomatic issue also. So when you have this ethic approach, what happens whenever there are like refugees or migrant people or people who are in a very different cultural setting in which they're coming, their eating habits are different. I have been in the prison where women have in Heathrow, okay, they called us because these women prisoners could not speak English and they wanted translator. They just gave them big piece of meat with only salt and pepper, and the prisoner would not eat. These people are saying they are on hunger strike. The officials in prison were saying they are on hunger, but it was not the case. The case was that they did not know whether it is Muslim prisoners. They did not know whether it was a halal meat or not, and the Hindu prisoners did not know, were not told whether it is a beef or or other meat. No, so they were not eating, and the vegetarians or choices were very, very limited, and they were penalizing these women prisoners for protesting, which was not the case. It was a question of different kind of food habits that they have. The kind of labeling which they do, like neurosis or schizophrenia or psychosis or mania, phobia, paranoia, all of them have been extremely contestable. Because who do you call? Because where are you in the position of power? If your vice chancellor or if your boss says certain things, you won't call it paranoia. While the employee would say, you would call it paranoia. No, the same incident would be interpreted differently if there is, say, students are making noise, or if there is the lift of your multi-storied campus is not working. The responses of those who have power and authority would be very different. Would be very different. You won't use those psychological labeling. Okay, you would say, oh yeah, we need to get the repair, lift repaired fast. But when it comes to people who are powerless or who are lower in the hierarchy, then you start using psychological labeling, and it happens more so in case of women. I know that when I was a full-timer of Women's Center, the in-laws would come just to ask for certificate. I said, ma'am, certificate, just give a certificate. I have this daughter-in-law. She is she is educated. She got married, and she just doesn't take part in anything. She doesn't smile. She doesn't cooperate with anything. And we just want a mental certificate so that we can use that to get her out of our house. Now, the problem was not that. Problem is that all the cultural practices in the in-laws place are very different. Moreover, the way they would talk about her parental family, or in an insulting tone, or in a certain kind of what you call very certain body language that they would use, or the eye contact when the in-laws they would have with each other, and try to have a meaningful smile about her, all these things. And she's alone in the in-laws place. She's a totally new to that environment. And it is in that context that these kind of behaviors are happening. And then they would use this label. But those who have power, husband, even if he comes home, completely drunk, and he misbehaves and breaks furniture and glasses, they would not call him neurotic. They would not call him schizophrenic. We had a case of a very wealthy family where the person came with a letter from social welfare department that both his sisters should be declared mad, and they wanted certificate for us. I said, we don't give certificate, number one. Number two, we would like to meet your sister. Now, this sister, both of them had studied they were convent educated, they were voracious readers, and they were married off to a business family, that means hardware shop owners, who were only talking about money, 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 money. And these girls they did not find themselves fit in that family because everything revolved around money, including whatever vegetables or fruits or whatever they bought, everything was with money tag, no? 40 rupees ka banana. So these girls, they said, we just don't, there is nothing in that family. I am interested in mathematics. I am interested in reading books. I am interested in some companionship with my husband. My husband doesn't talk about anything except money. And that's how, within 1 week of marriage, they came back to brother's place and they said that they are neurotic. Both the sisters are neurotic. And they said they're nothing. They're just asking, he has so much of property. We are just asking for 1 room kitchen flat. Both the sisters will stay there. We both are educated. We will teach the children whatever money we get from tuition. We will survive on that, no? And this, but that too, brothers were not very wealthy brothers. They were not ready to part with their 4 factories and all that thing they tried to tell us, no, to impress us. So this kind of a material reality becomes very important. And psychiatric labeling takes place when you are less powerful. It's a more powerful people who use within your context. So medicalization of mental health, which was very much a focus in the 2001 mental health policy, there was a severe critique. So many organizations who are working in the area of mental health and mental well-being, they critique this kind of approach of labeling and putting people into boxes, no, without understanding the social determinants. So you saw that today our course puts social determinants at center stage while understanding the gender and mental health. So this is what is AMIC approach, where understanding mental health illness, keeping into consideration multicultural aspects of women's existential reality and traditional treatment are also now included in the therapy, whether it is a meditation or yoga or group singing or listening to discourses, aromatherapy, color therapy, and the culturally sensitive counseling based on custom, religion, code of conduct, what is allowed and what is not allowed in that community. Very, very important to understand, because that is what determines how people are going to behave. And ethos of the community, they play a very important role. When it comes to psychiatrist use of chemotherapy or electroconvulsive therapy or administration of antidepressants, high potency sedatives, which are given, against that also there is a lot of questioning is happening. Psychotherapists use counseling technique, which is a hypnosis or suggestion or supportive therapy, re-education. You must have seen that movie, Shah Rukh Khan and Alia Bhatt movie, no, where a girl, young professional loses her job, and then she goes back to her parents' house, and she is in a tremendous depression, and she goes to the psychotherapist. Then desensitization or a group and family psychotherapy and psychoanalysis, they have also been used widely by the women's groups and also by the professional counselors, and then self-help groups also use it. So you have a self-help group of cancer patients, you have self-help group of young women who have adopted daughters or adopted child. So because their problems are, they are single women and they have adopted children, or they're the people with a certain kind of a lifestyle disease or diabetes, they come together and come out with this thing, or Alcoholic Anonymous, or those who have been addicted to drugs, they also come together and discuss and also show the ways of how to lead an alternate life from each other. Instead of some expert telling them, it is people in a similar kind of life situation. They are talking to each other. So there is an equality, horizontal equality. Okay, so one person is up there, another one is down below. That kind of inequality is not there. And that we saw yesterday, I told you about 4 phases of healing and how the normalizing takes place. And we have seen so many successful cases where this kind of a positive environment is provided. So the unequal relationship between professional counselor who is up there and the seeker who is down below gets compounded in case of women, because most of the psychiatrists, even yesterday they gave statistics also, that most of the experts happen to be men, those who are doing the practices. And subjugation of women by patriarchally structured psychiatric treatment, because the syllabus of psychiatry itself, I think Ms. Sangeeta Rege will enlighten us how they are doing this work on gender in medical education, that how many biases are there in medical education itself, which also are internalized by the medical students, doctors, when they become full-fledged doctor. Either they practice clinically or they teach or they do research, is also colored by this kind of biases. Myth of feminine qualities, which is so-called normal versus deviant behavior or women's choices, that is also this thing. If a woman has more than one sexual partner, she would be called nymphomaniac. Well, man, very when there is an old age home, and so many elderly people who are abandoned by their own family members, and they are found by the police from footpath and from railway station and from some other public places in a vegetative state. They are brought back and they are brought to this old age home. Now, after 10, 15, 20 days of medication and healthy, balanced diet, many of them come to normal life. And I was talking to a person, the young elderly lawyer, and he boasted with me that when he was young, he changed women the way more than he changed his t-shirt. Okay, boasting about it. And here, under the supervision of sisters and all that, his job was to look after the elderly people, and also in a school he was volunteer for teaching English and mathematics and all that. But men would do that, and still nobody passed any comment on it. They would not be called deviant. But when it comes to women, even woman, if she's assertive, if she's argumentative, if she's more articulate. In fact, there was a time in the history, that there are 500 years of history of killing of witches in the Western world, in Europe, from 13th century to 18th century. Any woman who was interested in abstract things in life, that means botany, zoology, mathematics, or chemistry, physics, anyone who showed such interest, they were called witches. And that's why you see even in the children's stories, who are the witches? Witches are the ones who are dealing with the chemicals. They are in a laboratory kind of a situation. They are not a properly dressed or properly, that they had not combed. That is the kind of image. But one who is more in the realm of ideas. No, so witches are always supposed to be bad. They will do only bad things, or even they give you bad omen. No, witches would never be doing good thing. It is only the fairies who would do good things. So this kind of thing has existed all throughout the civilization, and we saw that more than 1 million women were killed as witches. And what was if anybody dubs you as a witch, because it was a church and the state, we were worked so closely from 13th century to 18th century. And even after the Renaissance was only for men. Okay, women had to whatever writing and thinking and this they had to do in the name of men. Even throughout the Middle East also, we saw creative women had to write in the name of men. And Rabindranath Tagore has also written about short stories about this thing, what was happening in the 19th century, first generation learner women, and what kind of vilification they had to face. So this kind of, and the punishment for witches in Europe was extraction of their ovary without anesthesia. How do you like this idea? It's so scary, no? So, when the priest met, they had their conferences and seminars. They would be having someone would be taking silver plate in which they would keep all the ovaries which they had extracted, and they would boast with each other how many women they have controlled, how many women they have this thing, how many witches who were just interested in writing poetry, who were writing poetry, or who were singing, or who were painting. doing any creative work, any abstract work, rather than their mainly domestic duty and producing babies and n number of babies. There were no contraceptives on those days, no. So women were produce babies till they died, and maternal mortality rate was also very high. So when you talk about this myth of feminine quality, woman as a breeder, woman as a homemaker, woman as a carer, and anybody who does more than that, that vilification of that woman starts, and that also is a major stressor. So marginalization of mental health concerns of women is a very, very important. I think so many examples were given in last 6 sessions, that mental health distress is treated as an individual personal problem rather than societal issue. Instead of changing the condition of life, they are targeting the individual, which is called the ideology of victim blaming. There is something wrong in her, which has created this problem, rather than the condition that has acted as stressor. Role of collective effort, social effort, women's movement effort, role of even media and human rights concerns, they are very important. There are now in several places, countries, we have a human rights organization taking up this issue of mental health, which is linked to massive social problems such as war or conflict or dislocation, displacement of people from one place to other, disasters like tsunami, and the kind of destruction and death that people are witnessing, and that impacts their uh, personal life and individuals' mental makeup, and also the pandemic. So it is in this context that now you see more sensitivity in the context of human miseries that people experience during the pandemic. Worsening socio-economic or political conditions. So many community-based organizations have documented the experiences in the community, that how the worsening socio-economic condition results in increased domestic violence, increased alienation, what sociologists call anomie. Anomie means you feel completely out of sync of the reality, and you feel totally lonely, that by this Kolaveri Kolaveri D, that song, the way it depicts the pathos of a person who is completely feeling total loneliness, and now for the first time, like at least WHO is acknowledging loneliness as a major challenge of the 21st century. Atomization has increased. Neoliberalism makes you think yourself only in terms of right is might. Okay, might is right, that anybody who succeeds is a Jeeta Vahi Sikandar, Pakda Gaya Jo Bandar. So the whole obsession about Jeetna, and that too in a mercenary way, that it is a zero-sum game. Any human relationship is a zero-sum game. Either you win or you lose. No, it is the question of solidarity, camaraderie, sharing, caring, that is being thrown out by the neoliberal logic. So I think we need to fight against that logic also. And that also was told yesterday in our, I think the second speaker, she spoke about that. Even Mala Ramanathan, she told us. Caste and communal violence, worsening survival struggles in rural, urban, and tribal belts, addiction in the absence of food security. I went for to tribal areas of Maharashtra, and where there were no PDS shop, there was nothing, no fruits, no vegetables, nothing. Only there were shops of pan parag. So even the small child mother would there, and they got their daily wages by working in a sugarcane fields, because there was a commercial crop was very, that was the earlier subsistence crop was wiped out by commercial crop. And all these children at a very young age, they were, anytime they cried for food, they were given pan parak. So they would get cash. Children were getting 40 rupees daily wages. Women were getting 80 rupees daily wages, and men were getting 180 to 200 rupees daily wages for working in sugarcane field. But that did not give them goods which were required, like vegetables, fruits, or grain. They were, because for that they had to go, because PDS shop was not there. And the addiction became such a major issue in this jail. In fact, when we went there, they said, no, you can get daru, you can't get dawa, you can't get food. So that's how the children also talked about. Displacement due to mega projects, I think they have seen over last 30 years, so many mega projects, people have been dislocated, and which also temporary job losses, agrarian crisis, globalization, all these are a massive changes, transformation which is taking place, and the price is paid by the community. Violence also, like violence and sexual and domestic violence. There are so many cases, and I think even in Sangeeta's presentation, it will come that power relations within the family determine women's predicament in the domestic violence. Every time a woman survivor of violence is brought to us as a mentor, ma'am, she's a mentor. She doesn't talk, she doesn't smile, she doesn't eat, but when we tell them, okay, now you all go. We want to speak with the person. We will to speak with the, if she has accompanied them, otherwise we would say we will take home visit and speak with the person. And then the whole saga of domestic violence comes out. When it comes to adolescent girls, I think Yagna had the very first day she had asked for that mental health of girls depend on parental expectations, values and norms, rising levels of competition, pressure and anxiety about examination. And we also have more problem parents, because if the parents, now why so many young adolescent girls have to approach district commissioner's office, or even during the pandemic, so many distress calls, 25% of the distress calls were from the adolescent girls who were forced either into marriage, forced marriage, or they were in the name of employment, they were going to sell them to the procurer for sexual trafficking. No, so this is also, and even in a normal middle class home also, the girls now see the double standards for boys and girls, men and women, and that also creates a lot of conflict, because they have got liberal education which talks about constitutional equality, and what they see in their personal life is nothing but inequality at every step. And that also, this kind of conundrum also causes a lot of questioning. Counseling for substance abuse, what we have seen that all the support groups which are working, whether they are in de-addiction centers supported by the local self-government, halfway homes created by the NGOs and counselors, family members, important peers, schools and several schools and colleges also have counselors, and the treatment staff, I think all of them have now been trained to deal with the abuse, but there also the gender sensitization is not there, that how it would have a different implications in case of the alcoholic or a drug addict girl. There would be also question of unwanted pregnancy, abortion, and also sexually transmitted disease also will have a different kind of implications in terms of our acceptance by the family members, character assassination because of that, and reintegration within the family life. That also would be much, much difficult. When boy is a drug addict, parents try their best. They go run from pillar to post to get him into quote unquote normal situation. But when it comes to girls, they face abandonance. They are abandoned, they are vilified, and the massive domestic violence also takes place. So experience sharing can be empowering experience for the victim of abuse, and awareness about even HIV/AIDS. So in fact, Lawyers Collective has done massive work on HIV with the HIV/AIDS patient, and they also came out with a report that how there are gender differential responses of the health system, of the family, of the community, of the co-workers, of the employers, and of the personal friends. When a man gets HIV/AIDS and when a woman gets, she loses her children, she loses her property rights, she loses her matrimonial home, her own natal family are also not ready to accept them. So the complete isolation that women with HIV, and most of the time they are not even responsible for their HIV. It is the husband who had relation with them, and that's how they became HIV positive. Now, media we need massive gender sensitization of media, because the projection of mental health issue, first of all, there is a very scant portrayal of the mental health concerns, and the kind of processes which are required to have a very healthy approach towards the mental health challenges. So media education is very important. Projection of different standards of morality also for men and women that you see in the media reports, the kind of language which is used, that is also, I think, Ladli Media has done that work, population first. Dehumanization of women by the media, that also causes a way of looking at women as nothing but a spare part of for sale. No, she's just a body, not an thinking human being. Anxiety about figure, anxiety about beauty, color of skin, all this is also causing tremendous stress. In fact, the whole cycle of bulimia and anorexia that I think most of the college teachers are complaining about. In fact, Cecilia's college has also made a film on this kind of pressure that the young girls have about their beauty and whole figure and color of skin. Pornography and violence. Women's movement has always critiqued pornography, not from the angle of morality, but it is nothing but a valorization of violence. If you see XX and XXX pornographic film, it is nothing but it's a valorization and rationalization of sadomasochism. Man is a sadist, woman is a masochist, man is a hunter, woman is a prey. That kind of power equation it valorizes. And physical and psychological coercion of unmarried girls and the newly married brides. I think now every day we are seeing so many reports about how the blackmailing and cyber technology. And yesterday, Cecilia G, she ended her lecture with that she really finds the current situation really scary. How this technology and the deep fakes, they are going to play out in terms of gender relations and the kind of new threats that women are facing. Reproductive rights of women. I think women being treated as a son-producing machine. Tremendous pressure on women to produce, first of all produce baby, and within baby also, like you have to produce a male child. That is also a major stressor among young women. In fact, now we don't even have data because we don't have 21 census. But ground level, all those community workers are saying that son preference has become far more pronounced in a post-pandemic period, and UNFPA report also has given us indication, because UNFPA is working in 18-20 states of our country, and they say that the kind of area studies which are bringing out this very disturbing fact. The issue of premenstrual syndrome or a natal. So yesterday it was said that it should be just a reporting instead that premenstrual you get pain. Okay, but why do you call it premenstrual syndrome? That anything that woman, if your woman colleague is angry, or your woman boss rebukes you, you would call her she's PMS. No, PMS has become a big joke in the corporate world. And even postnatal depression about that also, the hormonal changes which are taking, the workload which a woman has. And I think Anuradha ji gave so many examples of hers, that what happens after a woman delivers a baby. And because she's completely alone, nobody shares the work, nobody gets her out of that grind. That also is a major stressor, rather than calling her that it is biological, it's because she's a woman, it's happening. New reproductive treatment. In fact, so many studies on surrogacy or even the abortion, contraceptive use, which are hormone-based, infertility treatment, they also have a tremendous impact on women's psychological stress. And the way medical fraternity response to it is completely insensitive, because they don't even treat it as a pain or a stressor. They just call it psychosomatic. And then this is you are just imagining it is this thing. It is only here in your mind. There is nothing biological about it. Repeated pregnancy and the reproductive morbidity. These are the totally reproductive morbidity is an under-researched area, that if you have a repeated pregnancy, repeated reproductive tract infection, what kind of, it's not only discomfort or pain, but it also affects your, they act as stressor. Menopause, about which I think we need a special session also, because the societal attitude towards aging women, I think that is a very important thing. We also in office, we hear anyone who is elderly, they call her old hag. Pathologization of menopause has happened greatly by the commercialized multinational pharma industries. Hormone replacement therapy is considered to be the panacea. Or is it? So line of counseling where the elderly people, elderly women, what kind of self-actualization they have, what kind of diet, vitamin supplement, exercise, about which so many self-help groups of senior citizens have now started appearing in different parts of the world. But still here we see that there is a lot of neglect of elderly women. In fact, HelpAge India and the even TISS study is very, very important in this regards, to understand what kind of alternative support system we need to create in terms of community work, group life for the elderly people, which enhances their sense of self-worth. Epilepsy is another very, very important area. But I think we should have had, in the next course, we will keep a session on epilepsy. But disability and impaired quality of life caused by epilepsy can be reduced by psychiatric and psychosocial referral counseling on how to live with refractory seizures and advice on vocational rehabilitation. I think this is the, so far as the social work agencies are concerned, I think it's in Waterloo. We need to have a far more grounded work to be done, and also the research and analysis is required. Public education to prevent persecution and discrimination against epileptic women and is very, very important. Most of the time, epileptic daughter in the family, generally she's unmarried and she's looked after by parents, even in her even in that later age, no? So geriatric care is another very important area. There are more organizations now which are working. Gerontology as a discipline has been institutionalized in the academic world, and universities and organizations, special think tanks, they have been thinking about it. So dementia, loss of cognitive functioning, memory loss, language abilities, loss of language abilities, abstract thinking, a loss of planning, all that is also challenging, because now our population pyramid is also becoming top heavy. We are aging, because we have the proportion of population which is sick, which can be called senior citizen, is increasing drastically, and birth rate is going down. So we have, and life expectancy has also increased in so many states. Now the overall life expectancy is 72 years for men, 73 years for women. That was in 2011. Now the latest data, I think it has even been more, maybe 75, 76, but we don't have data. But 2011 census gave us this data. So that also is a very important question. It's also linked to the physical problems that you have, the arthritis, like majority of Indian women have arthritis after the age of, say, 55, 60. Menopausal, after menopause also so many other health problems that come up. Estrogen replacement therapy and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, vitamins, to what extent they are, first of all, accessible, and what are their implications about that. More awareness is required. And spiritually rich and intellectually stimulating group life is very, very important. Wherever elderly women are, have been able to come up with such groups, then it becomes very, I know of one group which is focusing, it's a group of Maharashtrian elderly women, and they are focusing on singing classical songs, no? So they do. And we invited them on 8th March in our department, and they were so, it's a group of 15, 20 women. They do most of the work together, and they did know, and it is more of a, someone has a certain disability, other one has a strength, so they all pitch in and support each other to see to it that all their needs are met, and along with the spiritual needs or the need of self-actualization. So mental health hospital, I think about that, only couple of studies are there about how mental hospitals are treating women. First of all, stigma, one more major negative implication is stigmatization. Pigeonholing of women into set slots, it must stop. Madness certificate, which is now very, it has been normalized. Like anytime you want to dispose of your daughter-in-law or an unwanted woman member in your family, they would take them to Kumbh Mela or leave these women at the pilgrimage center. That is also happening. Okay, after every Mela, or you have so many women who are abandoned. Most of them are aging. This whole thing about madness certificate, I think that also about that some regulation needs to be brought, because psychiatry is the way you can get it for 5,000 rupees, because that's what they were telling. When we can get it from the psychiatrist, why can't you give? No, so kind of. So then the witch hunting of these women who have been admitted, even after they are ready to integrate in the normal life. Our experiences of women's groups have also shown that there are so many alternatives for a women leading normal life after such episodes. But we see that the stereotypes of the judges, of the police officials, of the mental health professionals, they also need massive change, because currently they are also going by the same double standards for men who have mental health challenges and women who have, and that prevents the integration of women in their families. Side effects of the biomedical approach also we need to know when the high potency drugs are given, because that's what the Alert India, the organization working in Bastis in Mumbai, was saying, that they are just any woman with any kind of a, say, quote unquote, according to their in-laws or husband and deviant behavior. If she's just sitting, as yesterday Sovani madam was saying, that do you sit alone and watch at one particular point for a long time? So there's, if that also is treated by the family, and they would take her to the hospital, first thing they would give her high potency drugs, and she's just lying down. If she asks too many questions, if they'd say that she's quarreling a lot, so what they would just give a chemical therapy. So the way chemical therapy is taking away the all other sensory abilities of these people who are subjected to it. There are studies done by the Health Organization on the pattern of prescriptions. Why it is most of the prescriptions of the hypertensive mood alleviator and tranquilizers are given to women. Man would go with this, even for normal aches and pains, no? When a man has aches and pains, you would try to understand what are the reasons for these aches and pains. But when the same thing is told by women, it would be treated as something psychological. And immediately, without even asking the history or without talking to her, they would just start writing prescription for hypertensive tranquilizers and medical mood, they call them mood alleviators. Women in police custody, they also have faced major challenges: social stigma causing marginalization, impact of solitary confinement. We have known so many women who were arrested during emergency. 5,000 Indian women activists were behind the jail. And their experiences, it was the women's movement which brought them into normal life. Some of them are running a big women's rights organizations. It was the right-based perspective, provision of a democratic space where they could tell what all happened to them during the prison days. No, so many of them in a solitary confinement, you have nobody to talk to. You're there except for four walls and the dark room. There is nothing. What would happen to them? No. So interpersonal violence in prison, we saw recently in Bombay, Arthur Road Jail, how the woman and she was other women prisoners were saying that she was very caring of elderly, she was very caring of ill person, and she's the one who raised the issue of that those who are ill should be given boiled egg. And then the prison authorities used very inhuman violence. It is still a question of the officers, the prisoner officers, all of them were women, and they were also suspended. But still, it is only tip of an iceberg, because prison condition, I have also gone on 8th March as a chief guest for prison, because some of our MSW students are now prison officers, and they invite you. And then you see the change in them. For no reason, why you have to talk rudely to them? Just line mein khade raho, you can say. They said, no, ma'am, these people know only language of danda. So if this is the way prisoners are going to be treated, you can imagine the kind of interpersonal violence as well as the bullying, and those who are short or frail or small built, what would happen to them? And also women political prisoners. We had Moraltai, Alyatai, they all were arrested during emergency, and they were put with the hardened criminal who had done multiple murders. And you should have seen when they came out of jail, what kind of horror stories they had to tell. It was the women's movement, they were part of the women's movement, so it was easier for them to cope with the post-traumatic stress disorder. Prison reforms for reintegration of ex-prisoners. I think that is the work which TISS Professor Vijay Raghavan has been doing through Prayas, because all these women, once they are, the anxiety of women prisoners when at the time of their release, because nobody comes to even receive them. Family members, husband, parental family, nobody comes to receive them. And that becomes the role of the human rights organization to create a community of that so that they get support system. Self-help groups, whether they are for mental health issues or for any kind of mental health stress generated due to, say, physical disability, or because of the extremely violent environment. I think SHGs are very, very useful. But now we have a budgetary provision for halfway homes. So NGOs can send proposals to the ministry, training programs for their skill development, and also the care, the deinstitutionalization is that's what the Mental Health Act 2017 is talking about, that why can't they be cared for home? Can't we do the counseling of the family members? And supervised domiciliary aftercare is also very important, where the social workers, medical social workers, psychiatric social workers nearby the health post, they keep in touch with the families so that they get the family life, the survivors, and they also get the medical care.
Sorry.
Yeah, this is the last one. Yeah.
All right.
So WHO has talked about the preventive treatment and rehabilitation, and they have also recommends that pharmacotherapy, psychotherapy, psychosocial rehabilitation, vocational rehabilitation, and housing and psychiatric reforms are required. And that's why what we see that we need a medical intervention, community-based intervention, family has to be sensitized, and in the rehabilitation, we should have more of a social support, vocational support, daycare, long-term care, and spiritual needs of a person should be there. And it also, this is what is a comprehensive way of dealing with the mental health challenges. So civil society and state, they both need to ensure more and more opportunities for women for all age groups, respect for diversity, plurality, multicultural outlook, and ensure democratic and tolerant milieu necessary for women's mental health growth is very important. Discrimination threatens and equality guarantees women's right to sanity and mental health. So I think this we need to understand. These are some of the references which I have used. They are there in public domain, easy to, I think they are listed also in the dossier that you have received. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful discussion. With your permission, we'll take the questions in the end. And
yes.
thank you so much, ma'am. I am now delighted to call Dr. Varudhini Kankipati ji, Director and Co-founder, Interconnect, Counselor at National Academy of Legal Studies and Research, University of Hyderabad, for an address on gender differences in people seeking and processing psychological counseling. Over to you, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you so much, Professor. I was really engaged in all your slides and all the comprehensive view of both men and women's issues in terms of mental health and access to it. What I would like to focus today is that I'm basically a practitioner, and a lot of what I deal with is with couples and families, women and men who come in for therapy. And I would like to stress that most of my clientele, or the group that I work with, are middle and upper middle class people. So just want to throw that out there so that I can give you some context to what my experience is, and also with research that has helped me while working with families in India. In particular with India, I will be focusing on. What I really would like to do is, all of you are in the mental health system, and I feel like this would be a great opportunity because you've had already a couple of days of learning, getting engaged with the various topics. If you can reach out to me, give me your questions, and I will try and do my best to try and give you a real hands-on approach to what I do as a practitioner when I'm dealing with gender differences and how they receive therapy, and how do we work on it. Okay, I'm more used to that type of interaction, so I hope all of you can feel free to send a message, or be able to, you can turn your webcam and talk to me, okay? So just a small intro, let me just present my screen and we'll take it from there. Just need to present that. Okay, can all of you see? Okay, perfect.
But your video has gone off.
Sorry?
Your video has gone off.
Oh, how do I turn that on? Oh, start my video. Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Yeah. So I have a counseling center, and it's called Interconnect. And the goal of the counseling center is slightly different from other counseling centers. We're India's first therapeutic family center. So our whole services that we provide in the center is psychiatry, child psychiatry, developmental pediatrician psychiatry, autism spectrums, children on various mental health issues. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is parental therapy, individual therapy, couple therapy, and all aided mental health services. The idea was, I've been doing this for 23 years. And what I've noticed in my practice is that when a woman or even a mother comes to me, her biggest concern is she needs to run around to see where to get all the services. They're not under one roof. And then it becomes about time management. And a lot of times they don't continue with the sessions because it's very hard for families with limited time to get therapeutic services running around from one end to another for their child, for them, for other psychiatry. So the idea within Interconnect was to provide one place to provide that services. And this has been a multi-modular approach that I've been developing for 5 years now. And we started with a very small place. Now it's a much bigger institute, a training center as well. Now moving on, if I can know how to, Okay, so what I'll be working on with you is just very practical information on how do you make sure your own gender biases or the gender different biases or gender differences that you see with couples who come in or individuals who come in, how do you get sensitized to it? How do you find the micro versions of these gender differences, and how do you start working around it to help your clients? So I'll talk about this as clients and a counselor. That'll be easier for you to understand. And the second part of it is that I'm looking at traditional gender issues. So I'm not looking at LGBTQ, none of that, okay? So it's just women and men, gender traditional issues. Okay. Thank you. So gender challenges, what do we do about that? One is that we need to look at whether the clients are, or whatever issues your client is facing, are we able to look at it in an accepting, flexible, and a bias-free approach? This is really, really important. I'll be spending a little bit more time on the bias-free approach in the next slide, okay? Okay, so this is a very big one. Bias conscious counseling, what does that mean? So the bias conscious counseling means that every counselor should have a level of awareness of their own values and beliefs. And you need to understand how, over one, your family background, your environment, your experiences, has shaped your own gender differences, your beliefs and values regarding gender. That's completely yours. And what happens is, if you're not aware of this, when you do sessions with your client, you're not going to be able to see it. And I'll give a simple example of this, okay? So for example, your experience could be that you come from a highly educated family where your mother and father are both working, and you've never experienced, and it's all girls. Maybe you come from an all girls family. Then all you know is that your father would probably, you would not know a difference of how your father would treat a son. I mean, if he has a son or a son in the family, because all you know is your sisters. So as you're growing up, how does your father relate to you as a woman, a girl child, or a working woman? Or how is the focus with education? You'll hear statements like this: we educated you, but now we see that the education has made you not listen to us. Have you ever heard of these statements? Like, they get made. A lot of parents will say these type of things, the older generation, that we educated you. I think we did a big mistake, because by educating you and making you more independent, we think that you don't know how to adjust to life or adjust to your family. And so you would think that maybe education, or families that are educated, would be more aware of gender biases, but that isn't true. You will see this time and time again, because gender differences come more from culture than any other place. It's not on education. Awareness of gender differences does not really make a difference till the cultural values of the gender are challenged and you look at it. So what do we do when we have that? What helps you as a counselor reflect that? One, all counselors, I highly recommend, should be in therapy themselves, so that they're constantly working on their own biases, the challenges they have in their life, and their own personal growth and awareness that does not come in the way of them working with their clients. So they need to be in therapy in some form of personal growth. And I'm still in therapy after 23 years. And I feel like it's a good practice. And I always teach that to my counselors, that, please continue your personal growth, because you will see that you become much more of what a better counselor you can be. Because one of the things you need to be as a counselor is positive, unconditional positive regard, non-judgment, and awareness of gender biases that come out. And if you're able to do that, you are more likely to be more effective in the therapeutic approaches that you're going to use. So your own constant awareness and values related to gender roles and gender expectations. Access and monitor your own activities in your daily life with gender fair practices. Recognize that you're a subject of the same biases as the rest of the culture. And I'll give you an example of this. So because I'm a woman, and when the couple come to me, I invariably get parents who come in and tell me that I should know the importance of why I need to keep the woman in the family and not encourage her to get a divorce. And this comes out, you know, they will never say this straight on my face, but they will insinuate it. And so remember that you are also part of that gender. So when the client comes to you, they see you as the gender that you come in as well. So remember that small little tip there. Recognize that you continue to increase your understanding of the social, biological, and psychological development of women and men. And I really think that when I was hearing Professor Patel give you such an insight on the current state of women and men with all the biases, that really will help you. And so constantly engaging in research and upgrading your current knowledge with the research that's out there in this will really help you to take something back in your own practice. I would like to constantly, at the same time while I'm talking, if any of you have like, oh, I have this question, please feel free to just put it in there, because I do like to know that, you know, I can engage with it as, you know, I do the slides as well. I can wait at the end, but I would like to be able to do that. So please let me know, okay? Okay, so what can we do to help us to not propagate some of this gender biases? It's the words we use in the sessions. The words we use, you know, and I know that there's a huge push for gender neutral words. And in a way, I kind of understand that, but not in terms of gender identity, more as giving a chance to approach a person without putting them in that square gender role. So for example, don't use man and men, just use people, humans, person. When you say a salesman or a milkman or a postman, you know, you're giving the gender that most likely is going to do it, right? So if I say nurse, most of you are going to think of nurse as women, right? It's an expectation. It's kind of already given that, you know, the nurse has a gender specific understanding. So when you try and use neutral words, it really will help your client also not to feel like they have a gender role expectation. And that helps when you start helping the client to dig deeper in their own understanding of what is bothering them, what are the challenges, and this will help. Housewife. Now this one, I have to tell you where I got this one from. I'm a faculty at Nalsar, and that's a law college, and a lot of them are very in tune with, you know, gender. And I remember when they would come and I would take an intake of the client and ask them, okay, so what does your mother do? Majority of them would say house manager. And I was highly impressed with that. They didn't say housewife, they said house manager. And ever since I learned this many years ago, I just have been really using that, because I really do feel like when you use house manager, it sends a very different message from housewife. And if I asked you that, you yourself will tell you the difference. It's really clear in the way you say the words. Yeah, so instead of a businessman, you can use a business person, you and your wife, you and your partner. So this could be, or what we call as a gender fair language. And if you start doing this, you will see that they start looking at you differently. And also you start to sensitize yourself to pick up nuances when you're having conversations with your client. Any questions? Okay, I'll keep moving. I'm aware of the time. I know it's a long day, so I won't go over, okay? Okay, clients' beliefs and values. This is a huge one. So part of that is, how do you help a client understand their cultural background and how that limits their own self-beliefs about themselves? How do you do that? Because if you say it, and if you say it in such a way, they will feel like you do not understand their cultural background. If you pull it out and tell them like, okay, you know, men and women, if you bring it out too quick, they're going to back off. The client will back off because they think you're pushing something of an agenda. Oh, you are a feminist, and they will back off. And you've lost the chance to have an open dialogue with your client to help them understand how their own cultural beliefs in gender is self-limiting their understanding of themselves, or how they can explore and start challenging their beliefs. So what do? How do you keep it open? The best thing is just to ask them to start talking about their life, and don't give any judgmental thoughts on that. Just let them say, oh yeah, so that must have been really hard, you know, when, you know, your father and mom were expecting this from you. And they will just keep on talking. The more they're able to talk about what real challenges they've had because of the gender they have. And I think a lot of times when we talk about gender beliefs and values, we really tend to look at only women, but there's a lot with men as well. And I'll come to the last slide on that. But sometimes we forget that men actually hold a lot of these beliefs and values, and it really does not allow them to get out there and challenge those as easily as it is for a woman to stand up and say, no, I'm not doing it. And I'll explain that because I've noticed that firsthand in sessions. So what is the best way? There's a technique in therapy where we just call it, you know, what is your narrative? Or, you know, it's like a storytelling. And it's almost like you tell the client to talk about their life like it's a movie, right? Like they're the main character of their movie, and they talk about various parts of their life, you know, things of their childhood, memories that have impacted them, and you know, how it impacted their self-belief. And then as they progress, depending, like if you say you had a 50-year-old woman come in and she starts to kind of go through her narrative, she'll start talking about, you know, her childhood. Father said, mother said, uncle said, family was like this, they did this. You start to build your understanding of what could be the client's value system and belief system that have been slowly forming from when that client's been young. And how you as a counselor needs to try and put and thread together how those gender beliefs weaved into significant relationship that the partner has gotten into, right? And how that impacts partner relationship, parenting, and children's aspiration, what you want from the child. It really weaves a lot into all of these areas. And once you start doing that storytelling, you start to understand what these beliefs are and how that starts to impact the way the client views challenges and what they do about it. The biggest thing with gender differences or gender perception, I think, is when it starts to come in the way of your belief and comes in the way of you taking control or power, that's when it becomes maladaptive, right? Like whatever beliefs you had. And how do we make the space so comfortable for the client to really feel like they can dig deep and look at that objectively. So we try and get the client to look at their emotions, but in a rational, objective manner. Okay. So a lot of times when you get the client to a space of talking about their stories, they talk about, you know, this was my upbringing, this is how it affected me, this is how I am in the marriage, this is how I am with my children, this is why I want my children to be a certain way, why I can't accept certain things about my children or my work or how I've progressed at work, then what you will notice is they will be conflicting and contradicting values that happen. And that's when you start to bring that out and reflect back to your client, they will start to notice it. They will themselves notice it. You can bring it up and say, okay, so, you know, with this example, you said you felt this, but then with this example, you said this. So it does seem like, you know, both these things were important to you, but they could be seen as, you know, contradicting each other. And the way you say that, and if you give that little bit of insight for the counsel and for the client, they'll stop. But you are not to take it any further than that. It is now up to the client for them to sit with it, understand what that contradiction and conflict is, and they will choose how to explore that. You give that safe space for them to do it. You are not to direct that, because if you direct it, it becomes your need and it will not make a big difference. It will become really very hard for the client to take it and move. It'll just be very, very, very hard. And they might just agree just because they need to agree, but they won't really be able to do anything about it. So when the clients realize they're contradicting values, they need time to self-reflect. They're the ones who need to explore the impact of these values and how that has directed a lot of their decision-making. And then the second, they need to direct how they want to solve it, or how do they want to make sense of it, or where do they want to make changes with the contradicting belief system regarding gender. Okay, and our job is to just help navigate that for them. Okay. Okay, so the next slide. This is the one that I kind of wanted to talk to about. So a lot of times when women come in for therapy, they come in already looking for emotional support and catharsis to talk about it. But for men, they don't come in so openly ready to engage with you. They come in with a little bit of apprehension, a little bit of hesitation, because counseling and spending an hour talking about one's feelings is not, majority of times, I will not say all, majority of men find that taking 1 hour of certain amount of time to just self-reflect and talk to someone about it is really not that easy for them. And so they mostly come in hesitatingly, and if they do, they take their time to kind of really use the space, 1 or 2 sessions before they dig deep, to give you a little understanding of where they are. And a lot of times, because of the way their minds and the way they process information, when they come in, they kind of come in, spill everything, and they want the solution to it. They're like, oh, okay, so what do we do now? What do we do? You know, and a lot of times therapy isn't about problem solving as much as it is about understanding and you deciding how you want to navigate it. And we talk about what could be the possible ways of helping reduce the stressor or change your challenges. So the third thing that you will find that most men come in with is they feel very helpless. If they have come for you for therapy, 80% they would have come feeling helpless because they don't know how to fix their problem. And so, so that helpless feeling is where the whole session needs to be focused in, because that is the pit of where all this emotion is going to sit with, and how they need to feel from helpers. How do you help them to feel like there are things you can do? This is how you can handle it, and help them to feel the power that they can have. This really plays out on two dimensions. One is when they're dealing with men dealing with their wives, and when they're sandwiched between their wives and mothers. And two is when they are really do not know how to help their children, and their children are struggling. These are the two main areas that they find themselves helpless. Okay, for women, it's slightly different. For women, they come in with wanting a lot of emotional support. They know that they'll get their kind of way out in some time, but they're not one to jump to fixing the problem in 1-2 sessions. They want more and more time to talk about it because they always feel unheard. Okay, so when you give them that time to feel heard, and then you slowly indirectly start working on what do you do to get yourself better, then they will entertain it. The second part of it is physiologically, women are built to get stuck with certain emotional traumas through their childhood and adulthood and relationships. And what happens for women is that once that small trauma gets ignited, they go into their past trauma. So that incident will open a can of worms about all the other incidents that have happened, and then they start talking about it. But the people around, especially the husband, we cannot understand it. They're like, why are you talking about always the past? The past is done. We've finished it. That was 20 years ago. But they talk about it like it's a lived experience right now. The emotion is so real. And women find it very hard to contain it, to understand how to let that pain and trauma and to let it go. Big myth is people think that trauma is related to a huge catastrophic, horrific event, but that's not true. Every single person will have trauma, because trauma is anything that has rendered the brain, an incident that has rendered the brain helpless, and it gets etched into our memory. It's like a fissure or a crack, and that crack is there. And if it doesn't know how to process it, it remains there. And any pain related to anything related to that, that crack opens. And so that for women, it's slightly different. For men, it works different. The trauma works different. Okay, so these are the practical tips in terms of helping you how to approach gender-free biased way of counseling. I will give it to all of you. If you can give me some questions, I'd be more than happy. Thank you. Question and answers. I'm just being very mindful of time as well.
Ma'am, I think we've got some questions in the comments.
Okay, perfect. Would you be able to guide me?
Yes, I'm just going to
start?
unmute them as well.
Yes.
Tamagni ji, would you like to go ahead with your question? Okay, so I'll read out her question.
Yeah.
So she's asked, can you please throw some light on how question of power is played out when one therapist is going to another therapist for therapeutic healing, self-reflection and progression, etc. in the field of counseling, and how does gender question get played out in such kinds of practitioner-client-based relationships?
Okay, so there's so much to that. Can you just give me the first part of it, and I'll try answering that, and I'll take it from there.
Yes. Can you please throw some light on how the question of power is played out when one therapist is going to another therapist for therapeutic healing, self-reflection, and progression?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So it's, see, when you say power, it changes the whole intent. When you say power, you know, a counselor, when one counselor goes to another counselor, it's with the understanding that we're all under the same professional umbrella, and there is no power dynamic there. And actually, when I'll give my own personal experience, when I go to my therapist, I don't go in thinking I'm a therapist. I go in as me. I go in as a 45-year-old woman going through all my things, and I go in. And the therapist who's there has always known me as just a woman who is by chance a counselor. So I don't think there's any question of power there. At least to my experience, I've never experienced that. And I'm a counselor to many other therapists as well. And I don't think that that's ever kind of played out. Could you tell me the second part of the question?
Yes.
That answers that.
In the field of counseling, and how does the gender question get played out in such kind of practitioner-client-based relationships?
Could you be more specific? Is there an example that I could more give a space, because it's so general?
No, so ma'am, can I just intervene here? What I wanted, am I
Yeah.
audible? Yeah,
Yes.
what I wanted to ask that suppose if the therapist is a man and the person who is going to seek, yes, help is a therapist but a woman, then how is that, gender dynamics gets played out?
That's a brilliant question. This goes back to the first slide. The counselors need to have a gender conscious counseling. So actually the therapist I go to is a male therapist. And I've never felt like in my interaction with him that there was any gender focused perception over me or direction that he ever went on. So I think it goes back to that first question. How aware are you of your own gender and consciousness counseling techniques, and your own awareness of your own beliefs and that of the counselor that you go to? And it doesn't matter if it's a male or female.
Thank you.
In chat box, there are many questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Snehal Neelji, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, ma'am, can you please explain that many of the women, they come with the mental health issues and still normalize the overburden of the responsibilities that it's my duty and I have to do it. So it's very difficult to counsel them. So what are the ways to, like give them a bigger picture, like why you have the health issues? So you need to just look into it and have some solutions.
Right. So that's a good, again, a very good question. See, I think you need to understand sometimes when you tell them that, okay, most of the burden of of this, everything is on a woman, and you tell her, listen, you've got so much on your plate, and you understand that there's a lot of gender bias, right? Like that woman has to hold all those roles and do everything, and it's not possible for her to do it. Now, if you told her, listen, you need to stand up for yourself and maybe, guide her, you need to be able to say, no, I'm not going to do this and do that. You are not looking at what her family structure could be. What could that do if she said that? So the first thing you need to do is first understand what is her space of voice in that family. Number two, would there be a way of engaging the spouse to understanding how some of this is affecting her health, and long term that won't help the family either, right? So how do you do it in a very non-directive manner? Because if you go directive, you're going to lose the client. You're completely going to lose the client. Number two, if you notice that the client, the woman that you're talking about, she knows she needs to kind of maybe not take on those roles. If you tell her you need to not take on, she's not going to do it. So instead, you need to help her to know how to ease some of it, how to take care of herself within that time. You need to work on very practical oriented techniques for her, minding that she's not going to do anything if you say, you know what, let the kids get up and do their own thing. She's not going to do it. She's not going to do it. So instead, you need to focus on tiny, small things that are going to be impactful for her. Once she does that, trust me, she'll get the energy and the strength to do bigger take bigger steps with that.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask my question? I'm Shruti here.
Hi,
Yes.
Shruti.
Yeah, hi. I am also from Hyderabad. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you, like, during the course of our work, we tend to see that women also come with their own biases, as
Yeah.
in with respect to gender stereotypes or, gender roles.
Right.
So if we see that they don't really have a problem with such kind of gender roles, would it still be necessary for us to sensitize? Especially, I've noticed this in my field work, that women are okay with isolation during menstruation and things like that. And then it is a dilemma for me. Should I really broach the topic and tell them that, look, this is a regressive practice? Or should I just make peace with the fact that, okay, culturally they've been conditioned to believe that this is okay, so I should not go there and I should respect their agency? Agency is a very gray term, and I always kind of struggle with what should be considered a woman's agency and what should be considered oppression.
Right. Well, I think that's, yeah. So Shruti, just to answer that, when you do work with the women and you realize that they themselves are part of the bigger problem with the gender biases, you need to understand, one, do they even have the introspection ability to see this as a problem? And if they don't, you don't approach it. Therapy is only as good as the client's ability to introspect and understand that they have the ability to psychologically look at themselves. That's a big part of what you need to do. You gauge the ability of that person's introspection ability. Are they able to see the differences? And if you notice that they don't, then instead you can try and not talk about, okay, these practices are regressive. You can talk about, okay, so you do it indirectly by saying, okay, do you think that, if your children did the same thing, it would help them or not? Put it in a question form for them to maybe to question that, but in a very non-directive manner, and wait to see whether that can plant a seed in them to even think differently. But if you look at them for themselves, they won't do it. But ask them how that practice might affect the children, they might be able to look at that objectively.
Yeah, can I continue to ask my question? Yeah. So especially in sort of rural areas, like I work with one-stop centers, Sakhi one-stop centers. These are crisis centers which work with women who face gender-based violence, and most of the cases are domestic violence cases where a lot of women have also resigned to the fact that violence is okay. Yeah, men resort to violence because they have a lot of stress, and women trouble them, and then they resort to violence, so violence is okay, that kind of an approach. So to bring them from there to believe that violence is not okay itself is a task. So beyond that, all these things, so a lot of times in the OSC Sakhi's work, what happens is this whole idea of conciliation and not go till the mental health support. I was asking the same question the other day as well, that it stops at conciliation and stops at negotiating no violence. You wouldn't go to the idea of no oppression or equality and power imbalance. You don't even go there. So in such situations, do you really see that there would be at some point a sort of empowerment or agency to women, or for women to choose? Such things are really questions I'm not able to communicate clearly, but these are the things I grapple with every day.
Well, here's an approach. I was just thinking of what you're saying. You're going in more for symptom management, to my understanding. If you're doing symptom management, that's all you stick with and see how they respond to it. If you see within that group, there are one or two women who have the ability to think a little differently, maybe then you can take that on as a little bit of a more advanced way of therapeutic techniques to help them. But by and large, I think you tend to stick to symptom management programs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you. Yagnaji, would you like to ask your question?
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. So my question, maybe this sound like a very basic question. We are an NGO working with adolescents in the Mumbai slums. Okay. And in the recent phenomena, what we are seeing is that the children in these adolescents in the age group of 10 to 16, we are seeing the change in their attention span and the impatience among them. So is it something, and this has been a very recent trend which we are observing. So
Yeah.
is it something related to mental health, or can you just throw some light on it? We are
Yeah.
trying to work around but unable to come out at any decision on that.
Right. So WHO came out with a really lovely research finding, and they had predicted that after COVID, there is going to be severe regression amongst children who were born through COVID all the way for adolescents. And that's the therapeutic family center came because of that. There has been a spike in children with attention deficit, be it ADD and ADHD, children on autism spectrum, children with severe anxiety, and forms of OCD. They're on a rise. And this primarily comes, if not genetics and other variables that we won't go into, one prime variable is online attention, what they have learned for stimuli.
Okay.
And that is from when they're very young.
Oh.
And that is where one of these main problems with ADD has come from in children.
Thank you. Because we have been seeing that earlier these kids used to sit for 4 or 5 hours all together happily. Now after 1 hour, 1.5 hours, they will get restless and they would like to go home. And thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Very
You're
helpful.
welcome.
Thank you. Rashmi ji, please ask your question. Okay, in the meanwhile, we can move to Chitra ji. Chitra Iyer ji, please ask your question.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Shivaranjani, ma'am.
Hi, Shivaranjani.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I have to share you something that I got more stress and depression regarding of these issues. At the age of 6, my mother is passed. Then I was married at the age of 15. And now recently in the pandemic time, my father is also passed away. So the thing is repeatedly is going inside my heart. And while I was conveying the thing to anyone also, that time I got relaxation. Then again, I was going with the same issue. So I have to meet a therapist or what I have to do, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, Shivaranjani. It looks like you've gone through quite a bit of loss at very significant points in your life. And that obviously will have a huge impact on you. And I can hear in your voice that it's even hard for you to even share this. I think you're very right. You do need to talk to someone to help you process this grief and loss. And also to have an understanding how that grief has kind of made your mental makeup and how you're approaching things and how you're challenged. And from what you're saying, you probably hit low points very frequently when, once that it gets triggered, you just get sucked into this vacuum-like feeling. I would highly suggest that you talk to someone to kind of process all of that.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Nihalika Yadav ji, please ask your question. Okay, I could read it out. So so she's written, male counselors are equally understanding as their female counterparts when dealing with women who have survived sexual abuse in any form. Also, what fears or apprehensions women hold when talking about abuse to male counselors, because victims find it difficult to talk to male counselors given the history of abuse that the victim has faced due to men.
Yeah, so that really depends on the victim or the survivor of it, or the person going through it, and also the therapist. Okay, now what I would clearly tell you is, like, we have a lot, like, okay, I think, you know, it's a woman who's gone through abuse, let her talk to another woman you know, therapist. That's true, it could help. But actually, equally, what I found was, when the male therapist is really good, he's able to be the male version of something for her to really process and get through. And it really depends on how equipped the counselor is. And definitely, I don't suggest that, you know, we always give the choice to the client to select either a woman or a male therapist. And then after that, it's, you know, how they process it and how they go through it is what matters. So you could have a lot of women who have gender biases regarding abuse. There are a lot of women I have seen, counselors, who feel like, okay, you dressed that way, you asked for it, like indirectly, right? You put yourself through there, or you kept putting yourself in that vulnerable place, that they lack empathy for what happened. So I think that this can be true of women therapists as well. So I think it really depends on the therapist and the choice and the client, the personality of the client and the experience of the client.
There's a second part to the question. So why is it that women who leave abusive relationships or marriages tend to blame themselves for not leaving early?
Sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
Why is it that women who leave abusive relationships or marriages tend to blame themselves for not leaving early?
Yeah, this happens a lot. And this is part of the guilt cycle. It's part of the Duluth model of violence and women in domestic violence. What happens is that when they do leave it, it's the first time that they are out of, and they're more in survival, that they get an opportunity to look at their past objectively, rather than just look at it as surviving. And when that happens, they do tend to have a huge amount of regret. And that is part of the healing process, when they're getting out and strengthening themselves and working through that pain.
Thank you.
You're
Adil, would you like to go ahead?
Yes. Can I speak?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dr. Varudhini, thank you very much for your clarifications. This question session is going more interesting. But there are a few questions in the chat box and also raised by you. So is there any kind, like, I think I am a male therapist. So,
okay,
you know, few things I am feeling that people also have some peculiar idea about male therapists.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why. When we speak about a therapist, we speak about a person who is trained in therapy. So whoever is trained, be it a male or a female, they need to have some qualities, and they know how to respond. So
right,
whenever we are speaking that a male therapist is not doing this thing right or wrong, so it's not about a male therapist. It's again gender stereotyping of therapists.
I agree. I
So,
agree.
yes,
That
so,
very fact is, again, gender bias there. Yeah.
yeah, of course, but they're persons, they're sexual abuse victims, survivors. They speak to us, to speak to me, speak to other male therapists with ease, because that's, if you can convey the unconditional positive regard, what you just mentioned, and then you can empathy. So I think anybody can help.
I completely agree with you. And actually, I have found that women who've gone through abuse, when they have had male therapists, it has helped even more, because then they learn to
Yes,
trust the male also,
yes,
who they
yes.
see.
So it's a positive role
It's a
model.
much more positive. I agree.
Thank you. That's one thing I thought I should raise.
No, I'm glad you did. I'm really glad you did. Thank you.
Adil Sayedji, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, yeah. So, ma'am, in your last slide, you mentioned about how men and women are different in therapy, right? It's like men take longer to open up, and it's the other way for women. So, my assumption is that you explain this with reference to cisgender men and women. So, my question is it any different for a queer person or a transgender person, or is it
Yeah,
them as well?
that's a really good question. It is slightly different. I'll tell you why. So when I've worked with people who are non-binary or however they would identify themselves, the first thing they do is they try to gauge how open the counselor is, because their experience has been that they're not sure, right? And so now they've come for help and they're very vulnerable. And so they try to gauge how open you are, how honest you are, how transparent you are in even the knowledge about queer or transgender or any of these issues. So my experience is the openness. And if you are very honest with them and tell them, hey, this is how much I know, but I'd love to hear more from you, they're more than happy to talk, and that starts the therapeutic trusting relationship.
Thank you. So I think we will, in the interest of time, we will.
Yes.
Can we take questions at the end of the session, if that's all right with you, ma'am? Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, I would like to invite you for the chair's remarks.
Yeah, I think it was a very lively session, and I think your interactive input was extremely good, and questions which were asked were also very sharp. Only one thing about epilepsy has not been discussed, but that can be discussed later also. There is a testimony one participant has given, and I just meant, so there is a Niharika Yadav, but that can be taken up after Madam Sangeeta Rege's presentation. It's already 8 o'clock.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
We hope to see you at future IMPRI events as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you all for the questions, because that kind of really helps us learn from each other. So thank you so much. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Now I'm delighted to call upon Ms. Sangeeta Rege, Director of Sehat, Visiting Senior Fellow at IMPRI, for an address on gender-based violence and mental health. Over to you, ma'am. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. And I would say excellent presentations by Vibhuti and Varudhini. You've kind of set the tone for what I'm going to speak about. But I also know that this is a class of adult learners. And so I just want to do a check-in about how are all of you, because it's been 2 hours. So do you still think you can go ahead with another 20-25 minutes? If you unmute or you just put it in the chat box, I'll be grateful.
Yes, sure, ma'am.
Yesterday and day before
Right.
also it went on till 9 p.m. and it's happening because of their questions.
As adult learners, we have
Those
chose to
persons
join.
are sticking to their time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So without any further delay, and I'm just going to kind of save on my bandwidth when I share my screen, so I hope that's okay. I will specifically be talking about gender-based violence, and the previous speaker, Dr. Varudhini, has also laid context of therapeutic interventions for people experiencing gender-based violence. So that's like a nice, premise for me to begin this work. I will.
PPT is working. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yeah. I will kind of quickly share the focus of my presentation, because the issue of gender-based violence itself is broad. I think I saw a couple of things in the chat box as well. Gender is not just a binary of men and women, right? When we are talking about gender and gender discrimination, we are talking about people who are discriminated not just as women, but as people who are intersex, people who are trans people, both men and women, and people who are in same-sex relationships. So the experience of gender-based discrimination is on a spectrum. However, most of my submissions today are in the context of gender-based violence being faced by women. And I will come back to why, because the time is limited, so I cannot possibly cover all forms of gender-based violence against queer people. But happy to kind of, share more materials about the efforts that are happening on the ground as far as responding to gender-based violence against queer people is taking place. So while I was preparing for this presentation, I looked at what is it that could be in addition to what people already know. And so I looked at the psychiatry curriculum of medical education. That is the undergraduate medical education, which is the MBBS course. Some of you may know that the medical education system and the curriculum has been revised after 20 years. And the new one is called as competency-based medical education. So I was quite curious to know about whether there have been any changes in the psychiatric curriculum for MBBS students. After that, I also go to a few studies which have been conducted in the last 2 to 3 years, which are studies based on perceptions of medical educators belonging to the discipline of psychiatry and others. But for the purpose of this presentation, I have culled out only experiences of psychiatrists. I'm constantly going back to the discipline of psychiatry because in a public and a private medical system, people who often face gender discrimination may be referred to the psychiatry. I know that the issue of mental health is far more expansive than the psychiatry, but that is one discipline allied to psychology also, and that kind of often is left to diagnosing people and so on. And that is why I've looked at this particular discipline. Then I go on to describing a little bit, but I think we did have quite some discussion from the last two speakers on the health consequences, especially the psychological consequences of gender-based violence. So without going into very generic psychological health consequences of gender-based violence, I bring to you again two evidence sources. A study that we did more recently on understanding the aftermath of rape amongst young people, mostly women and girls. And then, of course, I would like to close by saying everything is not bad as far as the formal health systems is concerned. And there are ways and means by which even a health system can offer a gender-sensitive response. I'm sure that in the last 2 days, you would have covered most of these issues about the issue of sex and gender. As we all know that neither sex is binary nor gender is binary. So this is just a quick revision in a sense to look at specific aspects that get attributed to people who are born as XX and XY, and anybody who falls outside this very narrow description of male and female are often subject to discrimination. So when you look at women or a person who's born as a female, often there are concerns related to the gender norms which are laid out by society, to the gender roles that are expected from them. And I think, as discussed in the last presentation, this double jeopardy of managing a home and managing children, as well as having a career and earning an income. So increasingly, it is kind of this challenging role of gender roles that are attributed to women. Traditionally, women are expected to be fragile, emotional. The ones who don't really subscribe to those emotions and are able to express themselves differently are often admonished. Research in India as well as globally has indicated inferior healthcare access to women more than men, because at least in the context of low and middle income countries, more often than not, women are dependent on other people in the household to take them to a health facility. Similarly, you can see over here how a gender role is defined culturally for men. They're often expected to take on the entire financial burden of the family. So for men who may want to be carers in the family, that kind of a role may be shunned, looked down upon. Traditionally, the attributes associated with men are those who are engaged in risk-taking behavior, those who demonstrate themselves aggressively. So again, those men who don't conform to this are punished in a societal context in a very different manner. And again, of course, as we know that you have the highest male participation in workforce, the more recent World Economic Forum data does indicate a higher number of women now engaged in workforce participation. But most of the women who are engaged in workforce are at a lower strung as compared to men. Men, of course, enjoy far more financial autonomy. So when we are talking about the issue of gender-based violence, we are really talking about conformity to sex that is assigned at birth, and people who cannot conform to the sex that is assigned at birth, and the distress that it causes, and abuse that is faced by them then from their families, which is essentially trans people, as well as people with varied sexual orientation. Along with that, there are also cis women who face gender-based violence within their private lives, which could be their boyfriend, their husbands, their parents for choice of partner, and so on. So the point I'm trying to establish is that gender-based violence is a large issue, and gender cannot be understood as a binary. If you look at traditionally, how is it that the health system functions, or what are the health inequities that one sees in the health system? You will see traditionally that more often than not, there is a hierarchy of diagnostics that are carried out, diagnostic research that is carried out traditionally on men, and those are the same attributes which are then used for male diagnosis are extrapolated for women. And this is peculiarly seen as far as drug dosages are concerned, as well as treatment protocols are concerned. So there is very little research, medical research, I would say, by looking at women and women's healthcare needs, and the possibility that women may present the same health problems as men, but with a different manifestation. So that is something that is lacking in the current medical research arena. Again, as we know that inequalities spread large because of the uneven distribution of power, whether it is about decision making, about seeking healthcare, whether it's about, whether it's also about seeing medical institutions perpetuate these inequalities. And this is seen, for example, if you have women walk into hospital OPDs without a male chaperone, then often they will be asked about, why has your male partner not accompanied you, especially if you're going to undergo some kind of a medical intervention. Then it's almost kind of ensured that you may not get the treatment if you don't have a chaperone with you. So that is also, a manner in which inequities get perpetuated, because we know often that accessing a medical system for women itself is the last port of call. And when they finally reach on their own, it's quite possible that they may be denied health services that are required. Like I said, that masculine experience is the norm on which diagnosis as well as treatment protocols are created. And again, as I said, that gender diverse people, when they do access health services, there are different kinds of discriminations, starting from the infrastructure in public hospitals as well as in private hospitals, where you may actually have no gender neutral toilets. You don't have gender neutral examination rooms. There are ill-equipped medical and nursing professionals who really don't know how to communicate with people who are queer. So that is a big gap as far as the current health system in India is concerned. I was trying to collate, what are the news clippings as far as gender and mental health is concerned. And I kind of went back to the last 6 months to 1 year. And I would say that the area of mental health has received some kind of traction, especially after the COVID arena. And there have been challenges around it. And so if you see all of these 5 different articles, they are bringing to the public domain challenges. For example, sexual harassment at workplace, which is faced by non-binary people, but the law does not account for that kind of discrimination, and there is no penalty for those who discriminate. So that is an important issue that has been brought to light through the media reports. There are also unnatural deaths of women because of gender-based violence, which have been brought to light. So, for example, the causes of death may indicate accidental poisoning or drowning. But upon a detailed inquiry, one actually comes to know, given the extent of consumption of the poison, or the nature of drowning, has been indicative of the fact that it could either be homicide or suicide. But that is not something that the system is willing to investigate into. So these were some of the articles that I thought I should kind of bring out to indicate how the issue of gender and mental health has at least surfaced in the mainstream media. Again, there is a large issue, I would say, around lack of insurance or insurance cover to cover outpatient related mental health concerns. And as we all know, that, seeking therapeutic intervention is ideal, but therapeutic interventions in a systematic fashion are not available to a vast majority of people who access the public health system. If they go to the private health system, it is definitely going to cause what is called as an out-of-pocket expenditure. But this is not something that gets covered in the insurance at all. And that's a huge issue as far as the Indian context is concerned. Similarly, you may have looked at, see, the recent budget is a transient budget because there are going to be elections and so on. But if you look at the budget of 2023, it has again not met expectations as far as creating affordable therapeutic interventions for people. So though we have this comprehensive, robust Mental Health Care Act, how is it really getting implemented on the ground? And is it really true that people with mental health concerns are able to avail of any benefits as far as this law is concerned remains a question. This was a situational analysis study that the organization that I belong to, which is called SEHAT, Center for Inquiry into Health and Allied Themes, had conducted in the year 2022. The rationale for conducting a situational analysis into clinical practices was to really kind of understand if, given the changes in the competency-based medical education, given the changes in the law, given the fact that now medical providers are expected to provide a certain kind of therapeutic intervention for people in general and for gender-based violence survivors in particular, has anything on the ground changed? So this was a Maharashtra level study across 10 medical colleges in Maharashtra. And this is extremely surprising because in 2023, these are the views of psychiatrists. Like I said, that we had done this study with psychiatrists, with gynecologists, with doctors in the casualty departments, and with forensic doctors. But for the purpose of today's dialogue, I have only brought in excerpts from what the psychiatry department has said. And they've said that domestic violence against women often occurs due to alcohol addiction or belonging to lower socioeconomic strata. Now, we know that both Indian data as well as global data has actually questioned this kind of association. But this is a continued association even in 2023 by people from the psychiatry. There is also a certain perception about how is it that women present themselves who are survivors of gender-based violence. So often they say that these are vague complaints, they are non-specific, like abdominal pain, body ache, headache, and so on. And they feel that because it does not fit into a specific mental health medical condition, they really can't do much about it. Oftentimes, without the consent of the woman, the family member is involved when there is a disclosure of violence, without even recognizing the implications of this on the woman who has disclosed violence to her provider in privacy. So it's a complete violation of all patient-doctor ethics, I would say, when a family member is often brought in. Also, they hesitate from using terminologies like gender-based violence, domestic violence, but they will continue to call it as family environment is not good, or there is a dispute, or there is a disagreement. So they'll shy away from using the terminology of domestic violence or gender-based violence. Also, oftentimes, gender-based violence itself is minimized by doctors. There is something called a medico-legal case, which is often documented by only a registered medical practitioner when he or she suspects that an underlying episode is not a medical condition, but is a symptom of some kind of violence. So often they will dismiss a health consequence such as accidental poisoning or an attempt to suicide as a behavioral problem and just resist recording a medico-legal case. The importance of recording a medico-legal case is that in any eventuality, if a survivor of gender-based violence decides to access legal justice, then this document can be used in the court of law. But that is not something that medical providers often understand, and so they are dismissive about making such cases. This brings us to an important issue within the arena of mental health. Now, in every hospital in India, on a given day of an OPD, we receive at least one or two women or young girls with this complaint as accidental poisoning. And, this is something that has been, I would say, ailing the public health system for way too long. Women and girls are brought into the public hospitals in India or even private hospitals in India with a medical complaint called accidental poisoning. They are taken to the casualty department, they're admitted in the hospital, they are given all the medical treatment that is required, which is, usually they do this entire abdominal wash to remove the poison from the body. They will stabilize the patient and so on and so forth. But the crucial role of understanding whether this was accidental poisoning or whether it is an attempt to suicide is completely missing in the current system. So, for example, there are very clear indicators for understanding if it was accidental poisoning. So when, women or girls disclose that they accidentally drank phenyl, a question like, why would anybody accidentally drink phenyl or rat poison at 2 a.m. in the morning somehow does not arise in the mind of the treating doctors. And that is, that is a kind of complicity, I would say, because all they want to do is stabilize this patient medically and then discharge her when she's fit for discharge, without actually getting into the depth of what is it that would have led her to accidentally consume this kind of poison at 2 a.m. in the morning. And these are important questions that doctors don't want to ask. But at any given point in time, at least 1 or 2 women in any hospital of India, if you go around, is admitted every single day in India. So the burden of accidental poisoning on the health system is large. And this is a preventable health issue. It's quite possible that if a doctor is able to sensitively probe within the given conditions of privacy and confidentiality to a woman or a girl about what actually happened, it's possible to probably prevent another attempt. But that is not something that the health system is even looking at. So we may not know if it's the same person who's reaching the hospital today with accidental poisoning and tomorrow actually comes with accidental burns and then dies. The system is not even tracking if there is a repeat episode of accidental poisoning. And because it's a gendered issue, there is very little attention given by the public hospital to this issue itself. So there is yet another quote here from a doctor who says that our role is to find out if there is any psychological distress, if there's anxiety, depression, or any alcohol withdrawal. Accidents can occur due to alcohol intoxication or withdrawal. So you have to find out if there is any psychopathology. Accordingly, we have to treat that psychopathology. That's our role. If it is accidental, without any stressor or psychopathology, there is no need for intervention. Now, classically, domestic violence, gender-based violence does not fall into a psychopathology, right? It's not a symptom. It is a social context and abuse of power that is leading to violence. But currently, the health system is not completely equipped to even recognize this as a form of violence. This is yet another study that we had carried out to understand what is it to live as a rape survivor in India. And this was a study that we had done about 4 years ago. And there is a book that we were able to publish. It has short stories of about 10 survivors belonging to different age groups. And, I can send a link of that as well if anybody would like to read about their survival stories. And we were really trying to understand what happens after rape occurs and what is the trajectory that their lives take after rape, And so we were trying to understand its impact. So these were the different experiences shared by survivors vis-a-vis the community, vis-a-vis the police system, vis-a-vis the health system, and the court system. All of these systems, excluding the community system, are expected to perform a certain role in order to respond to survivors of sexual violence. But if you look at these snippets here, there is nothing in the system that is done in a manner that can encourage a survivor to continue to pursue legal justice. In fact, each of these experts very clearly indicate what are the reasons that rape survivors fall off the radar of pursuing legal justice. And I don't think I need to read each one of these, but just to give you a snapshot that in, at least I'm sure that this is true globally, but in the Indian context, what it takes for a rape survivor, A, to report rape, and second, to navigate all of these systems and continue in the criminal justice system completely of her own volition to seek justice. Because this is completely left to the survivor and her family, whether she can or cannot continue to seek legal redress. So this is where we are as far as the rape response is concerned. And what is distressing is that after the Nirbhaya episode occurred in 2013, several reforms took place in the law. Several guidelines were issued to the police, to the health system, as well as courts. But the study that was done in 2018, and in a metropolitan city like Mumbai, indicates that really on ground, very little has changed as far as rape survivors is concerned. These are again a couple of snippets from the study about living after rape. And, if you see from the community perspective itself, a lot of times there is hostility, there is intimidation. The community is unable to understand, whether rape occurred or not. So a simple example, as if there is an accused who has been put behind bars and gets a bail for a large amount of money and is out on parole, the community continues to think that rape did not occur because he is wandering around in the community free. And so one can only imagine, the rape survivor and her family lives in that complete isolation and humiliation within the community. Because there is a lot of casting aspersions about the rape survivor. So our communities don't even know the difference between a bail and an acquittal. There are several instances where, in cases of adolescents and children, parents have had to give up their jobs. The ones who could afford were able to relocate. The ones who could not afford to relocate have continued to live in the same situation. When we tried contacting the parents to indicate that there was a need for continued counseling, a lot of times parents of the survivors would say that the child or the adolescent or the adult will forget the episode on her own. So don't carry out this counseling, because the more you talk about it, she will never be able to forget it. So there is a traditional notion that if we don't talk about any form of domestic violence or rape, then it goes away on its own. Because everybody is just too scared of, what will be the aftermath once a person starts talking about it. So that is the huge challenge. We have some rape survivors who actually attempted suicide after rape, after bail, also in instances where the accused has got an acquittal. Now, all acquittals do not mean that rape hasn't taken place. An acquittal simply means that there was a lack of adequate evidence to indicate that this was the accused in the rape. So these are the challenges as far as rape survivors are concerned, and this is the impact on their physical and mental health. So quickly, just to say, this is a slide from the World Health Organization, and I think it is true for every country in the world, because these are the effects of gender-based violence. Women especially, who suffer gender-based violence are twice as likely to experience depression, could possibly be twice as likely to have alcohol use disorders. In the Indian context, there's an addiction as far as tobacco is concerned with women. They're 16% more likely to have low birth weight babies, almost double the time possible to acquire sexually transmitted infections. So this is the spread really of the impact on health that gender-based violence can lead to. I quickly just want to show you a 2-minute video, which I thought will kind of, just sum up what I wanted to say. Just give me 1 minute. Can you all see it? Is this visible?
1 in 3 women experience violence at the hands of their husband or partner. That's over 800 million women worldwide. These women can feel trapped, afraid. Their lives are often restricted. Those who consider leaving often fear ending up penniless or losing their children. Over time, their confidence slips away, making a life without violence seem a distant memory. The abuse can lead to injuries, as well as serious physical and mental health problems, in some cases, even death. Many women contract sexually transmitted infections or have unwanted pregnancies, and when pregnant, have a greater risk of miscarriage or of having a premature or low birth weight baby. They can experience depression, anxiety, other mental health problems, or become addicted to drugs and alcohol. It can be hard to know who to trust or where to turn. But there is a place they can go. A visit to a local clinic is often one of the few opportunities women have to go out alone. And it's important for doctors and nurses to make sure this isn't a missed opportunity. When doctors, nurses, and midwives listen with compassion, survivors are more likely to share their story. When they ask the right questions, they can uncover what is really happening and challenge cultural attitudes that say it's okay for a husband to hit his wife. They can reassure women that it's not their fault and can work with women to help them stay safe. And where necessary, connect them with other services that can provide, for example, shelter, psychological support, legal services, and financial opportunities. More women can find their way to a life without violence when changes are implemented across healthcare and other systems. Changes such as private rooms for consultations, training that enables doctors and nurses to respond better to women's needs, and raising awareness of the harmful consequences of violence for women and children and how to prevent it. Making these changes helps foster a culture where violence is unacceptable and where women have the courage to speak out. Imagine if that could happen to each and every one of those 800 million women.
Yeah, I just thought instead of explaining all the different mental health and physical health consequences, the video really sums up in many ways what is the impact of violence on health. These are just the last 1 or 2 slides, but just to reiterate that responding to violence is not about diagnosing people with a mental health illness. We all know the relationship between gender-based violence as well as mental health. The fact that if you are facing a mental health issue, you are probably more susceptible to facing violence, at home. And if you're facing violence, there's a high probability that that will have a negative mental health consequence for you. So the cyclical relationship is something that healthcare providers must pay attention to, rather than make these, direct interlinkages between them. And the point is that how do you approach the issue of gender-based violence with women and girls? It's not as technical as it is supposed to be, in the heads of doctors. It's not about diagnosing women and girls with PTSD or with common mental health illnesses, or where do they really fall on axis 1, 2, 3, and 4. But it is about creating an enabling environment where the woman and girl can actually disclose about violence without fear, without being having any fear of being judged, getting reassurance, expressing her concerns. That's really the need, I think, of the hour. Nobody's expecting a healthcare provider or a health system to completely, reform the issue or rehabilitate a survivor of gender-based violence or solve the issue at all. What they really need is somebody who is non-judgmental and willing to listen to them uninterrupted, and stop offering solutions, but actually say that you are there for her and you can connect her to resources. So that is really the expectation, I would say, from healthcare workers. And so I end with something which is called the first line support. This is again a terminology and a model that was developed by the World Health Organization for countries which are ill-resourced as far as availability of healthcare workers is concerned. In our country, we already know that less than 3% of the GDP is actually being utilized for health budgets. So we are falling very short as far as the financing of the health sector is concerned, and more so the public health sector, I would say. So a lot of times we get asked these questions that, we have huge OPDs, we are looking at more than 200 patients. It's impossible for us to give the kind of time that is required to single patient. One is not expecting a doctor or a nurse to carry out counseling, right? That is a specialized skill for which you need training, and it's quite separate from the lives model. The lives model is something that can be delivered in the process of seeking history and in an OPD examination, so long as a doctor or a nurse fulfills the basic criteria of privacy, ensuring confidentiality, and so on. So quickly, what is the lives model? It is 5 simple tasks. It's listen without judging. It's inquire about her immediate needs or concerns. It is about validating her experience and not questioning it or assessing for what did she do wrong. It is about enhancing her current safety. And if she is feeling unsafe and she discloses that, connecting her to a resource. The resource could be a counselor in a hospital, or it could be a helpline if there is no counselor that is available. And basically make efforts to connect her to additional social support systems. So these are the 5 simple tasks that are expected from healthcare providers, even in the busy OPD or busy IPD. And there is clear evidence that that has actually happened in several places where Sehat is collaborating with the formal health system in India. And, if you permit, IMPRI team, I just have another very short video, or I can put the link there to show how the lives model is being operated.
Yeah, you show the live model because that will be more convincing.
Okay.
For a woman experiencing domestic violence, support provided at a healthcare facility is often the most important intervention in her life. And for a healthcare provider, it is very likely to be their only opportunity to help the woman. Sehat's evidence-based training for healthcare providers that has upscaled the healthcare response to domestic violence across several public hospitals details how critical first-line support must respond to both the emotional and practical needs of women. Its various components are easily remembered as the acronym LIVES. LIVES reminds healthcare providers of the 5 tasks that can protect women's lives. The L in LIVES stands for listen. Listen to the woman closely, with empathy and without judging. This forms the basis of offering first-line support. Healthcare providers must set aside commonly held notions to be able to listen to the woman sensitively.
The basic approach of this training says that listen. Previously I used to talk, but after training I learned to listen, because if you listen to someone, then you will get all the details.
Active and empathetic listening encourages the woman to keep talking if she wishes. Questions like, "How can we help you?" or "Would you like to tell me more?" can help. The I in LIVES stands for inquire. The healthcare provider must sensitively inquire about the woman's needs and concerns.
So we came to learn that not to ask direct questions, not to give our opinion or our judgment on them, and let her speak. And once that flow starts, once that connection is established, that doctor-patient relationship emotionally is established, she will actually tell you the whole history.
For that, we are asking some open-ended question to the patient. The questions whose answers will not be yes or no. There will be a lot of elaboration on the part of patient. If you ask, how you feel? What is your experience? If I ask such question to the patient, she will elaborate all the things.
While inquiring into the survivor's needs and concerns, a few prompts could help her identify and express herself. For instance, the healthcare provider could ask, "Is there anything that you need or are concerned about? It sounds like you may need a place to stay. It sounds like you are worried about your children." The V in LIVES stands for validate. Women's experiences have time and again brought forth how legal judicial systems, as well as their own families, do not believe them when they disclose violence. Healthcare providers must make efforts to demonstrate that they believe her narration and provide an assurance that she will not be blamed for the violence. There are some important things that healthcare providers can articulate to validate a survivor of domestic violence. It's not your fault. You are not to blame. What happened has no justification or excuse. No one deserves to be hit by their partner in a relationship. You are not alone. Many women suffer abuse in their homes due to social norms that give privileges to men over women. Your life, your health, you are of value. Everybody deserves to feel safe at home. I'm worried that this may be affecting your health. We are here to help. It's important not to judge what the survivor has or has not done or how she is feeling. Statements like, "You shouldn't feel that way," or "You should feel lucky you survived," should be scrupulously avoided. The E in LIVES stands for enhanced safety. A woman may decide to return to an abusive home because she has children to care for or other responsibilities. The role of the healthcare provider is to communicate concern for her safety. Some important questions to ask would be, has the physical violence become more frequent or intense in the past 6 months? Have you been threatened with a weapon? Do you believe the abuser could kill you? Elements of safety planning could include discussing a safe place to go. Would she go alone or take her children with her? What would the mode of transport be? Are there any documents, keys, money, clothes, or other things that are essential? Does she have access to money in an emergency? And would there be the support of someone close by? It is also important to identify and address mental or emotional problems such as symptoms of stress, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep disorders, misuse of alcohol or drugs, and self-harm or suicidal ideation, including thoughts, plans, or acts.
All the staff was informed about all the facilities available for these women. For example, the laws about which even we were not aware. we being the educated females, we were not aware about the law. And unless one is aware about the support, they won't look for it. Second, when they know that she is a survivor of violence, they will be in a position to give them at least psychological first aid. Third, if she demands or if she wishes, then again the staff will be in a position to guide her to the appropriate authorities or appropriate resources so that she can get her needs fulfilled. For example, some people may need a shelter, so they will be guided appropriately. Some people will just need some guidance about how to be safe or how to be ready. So in that way, whatever is the need, accordingly the staff will help them.
Right now, after this training, I know there is a safe care number which I make sure that I'm giving. I have an entry book where I'm doing the entry. I'm taking the female's number, I'm giving her my number. So there is a follow-up. I know what is going to happen. I'm just not sitting and doing wishful thinking.
The S in life stands for support. This support is essential in helping the survivor navigate several practical aspects of life involved in dealing with abuse.
We introduced a resource directory which contains a list of the organizations, protection officer, the legal help, the NGOs within the vicinity of the hospital for the additional support services which are beyond the scope of the hospital.
तर सेहतमुळं खरोखरच मी खूप सक्षम झाली असं मला वाटते आणि सेहतमुळं आणि या मुक्त प्रोजेक्टमुळं आमची एक बघण्याची नजर बदललेली आहे. पूर्वी पण पेशंट येत होते, बघत होतो. बायकांचे असे प्रॉब्लेम नवऱ्याने मारलं किंवा काही त्यांची इतर प्रॉब्लेम त्या बोलत होत्या, पण ठीक आहे असं एवढं त्यात आम्ही गुंतून जात नव्हतो. पण या प्रोजेक्टमुळे अगदी त्यांचं आम्ही डिटेल सगळं विचारतो किंवा त्याही अगदी आमच्याशी मनमोकळेपणाने बोलतात. त्यांना आम्ही भरपूर वेळ देतो. त्या अगदी आपल्या मनात म्हणजे कुणालाही सांगता येणार नाही असे प्रॉब्लेम पण आमच्यापाशी बसून त्या अगदी मनमोकळेपणाने सांगतात, त्याच्यावर चर्चा करतात. मग त्यांना खरं तर बाकीच्या गोष्टींची काही माहिती नसते. त्या सेहतमुळे आम्हाला पण या बाकीच्या माहिती झालेल्या आहेत आणि त्यामुळे आम्ही त्यांना योग्य मार्गदर्शन करू शकतो.
Healthcare providers often refer survivors of domestic violence to protection officers from the Women and Child Development Department. The protection officer's role is to facilitate various services such as shelter, legal aid, safety, and also protection orders to ensure women are safe in their marital or parental home without the arrest of the abusers.
One patient I remember, she is second gravida. She came for termination of pregnancy. Her husband thrown her out with her baby of 1.5 years, and she is second time pregnant. She is 6 months of amenorrhea. As we all know, MTP cannot be done at that gestational age. So I admitted her. I asked ward sister to counsel her. Then with the help of protection officer, she could get the shelter. And then she delivered, and that baby and mother both are healthy. And now she is working in some doctor's home for housework, and now she is feeling happy. It makes me feel proud also. And it gives a job satisfaction. Last week also she met me in the office and she told I am happy. So that feels nice.
So it has built up a team spirit, and everyone considers that we are doing something worthwhile so that this menace of domestic violence, we can do something for the survivors.
Yeah, that was all.
Questions,
Thank you so much, everyone, for your patient listening.
And now they're asking.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your expertise with us today. I would now like to call Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to give the chair's remarks.
Yeah. I think I don't need to say much because everything was there in both the films, and Sangeeta shared the major highlights of Sehat's work over last 20 years, where how the health system responds, what is the situation in which women are approaching in case of survivors and victims are approaching in case of violence which they face, and societal response, and how the criminal justice system and health system needs to be sensitized. I think it's a very important learning from this lecture, and I think we should replicate this effort. And I think 6 states have already started accepting this kind of model. Along with public education, also providing immediate service. As the doctor in the film said, I'm not just doing wishful thinking, I'm also providing service, which is very important.
Thank you, ma'am. There are a few questions in the chat box, so if we could take those up. Chitra ji, if you would like to go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to, first of all, I would like to thank you, ma'am, for such a wonderful session, and the videos were really very helpful, very informative. Thank you for sharing that, and we would like to receive the link of the videos and all, so that we can share with the community where we are working. I just wanted one question to be asked. Can financial literacy help women planning for their own safety? Just as we do for birth planning and all. So for, women in an abusive relation, can this help? And when to start it, at an early age or?
Yeah. Thank you very much for your question. Whether there is abuse or not, financial literacy, financial independence is critical for both men and women. And unfortunately, a lot of women are not financially independent, nor literate. It's never too late. I would say start as young as whenever, young women start working or so on to be able to save, etc. Financial independence and literacy may help a woman to make a decision about whether she wants to leave an abusive relationship, not just a marriage. But I would say that we've seen survivors of gender-based violence who are financially independent and yet have to give their entire salary to either a father or a spouse or a boyfriend at home. And so I think along with financial literacy, it is also about assertiveness training to say that towards the household, I will be able to take 30% of the expense, but this is something that I have to secure for my future, for my health, and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jayatri ji, would you like to go next? Okay. Then in that case, Subrajyoti ji, if you would like to ask your question.
Hello, madam. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very nice and informative. So what I have last asked in this chat box also, whether this lives model is similar to the psychosocial first aid model, or it's something different.
Sure, sir. So the psychosocial first aid model, I think, was released by the Johns Hopkins during COVID, if I'm
yes.
right. So it is very similar to the psychological first aid. There are a couple of tips, I think, which are additional in the lives model, which are specific to addressing the issue of gender-based violence. But I don't see why we can't use the Johns Hopkins model as well, because it's all about containing your client, listening to them, providing them the space to be able to disclose. So I see them as similar. They're not really in conflict.
Right.
So yes, it's absolutely fine to use that.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question: the doctors, when you were, giving trainings to these doctors and the health staffs, so of course there was a issue of being overburdened with their own work. So, how did you handle that? Because that's also kind of a roadblock to the learning.
Correct. So as I said, and as you may have seen in the video, that the offering of lives doesn't take more than 5 to 7 minutes. Also, let's go with the prevalence rates. So let's say the prevalence of intimate partner violence as is defined in the National Family Health Survey is about 1 in 3 women. Or 1 in 4 women. The statistic has slightly changed since they've dropped the group of 16 to 18. So a doctor or a nurse is not going to ask every woman entering the outpatient department whether you are facing domestic violence or not. It is going to be based on clinical identification of signs and symptoms in a specific OPD, where they think that the way she is demonstrating her symptoms, there is a possibility or an association of violence. Having said that, the lives is just about, psychological first aid. It doesn't take more than 5 to 6 minutes. It's something that goes along with your process of examination and provision of treatment. So at least these healthcare workers, both doctors and nurses in the video, told us that it did not take them more than 5 to 7 minutes. I hope I have answered your question. And I just wanted to respond to a comment, I think, in the chat box. Yes, I would definitely say it is not easy to go the legal way. Also, in the legal system, I think is full of flaws. There is a lot of back and forth, despite we having a robust law like the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. We know that there are a lot of, fallouts. There are corrupt lawyers. All of those things are there. And that is why often for women, going the legal route is the last resort. But for the ones who decide to go, I think it's important that the system be made sensitive, the system be made accountable to survivors of gender-based violence, which you saw from the study that I quoted of the aftermath of rape, that they weren't. And so, yeah.
Thank you. I'll just read out a question from the chat box. Is it considered as rape in our country if a girl is given false promise for marriage before having sex and the promise is not kept later? Is the consent given by the girl for sex is then considered to be invalid?
So this is a challenge in the law, I would say, and there's a huge amount of debate on this. The 376, the section 376 A, B, C, D, in the current law, a woman, who has been asked to have sex on the pretext of marriage and later the promise has been withdrawn of marriage, can go the legal route and can file a complaint of rape. Having said that, we need to speak to women who have been advised by the police or by the courts to file a case of rape. Because what is it that they want to gain out of it? In the Indian context, sexual activity which is outside of marriage itself is considered a taboo, right? So it comes with its own concerns about the good woman, bad woman issue if there is sex outside of marriage. And I think increasingly we need to challenge the notions and demystify that sex has nothing to do with marriage. And the fact that if it's a healthy relationship out of consent, then sex is absolutely fine. And sex need not be associated with marriage. We have several pending cases in the court of law today for false promise of marriage. And believe me, once a woman has entered the legal justice system, it takes months and months and years for the entire situation to go ahead. And it really doesn't enable the woman to move on till there is a result of the case. So if, for example, somebody comes to us to seek legal advice, we would try to understand what is it that she would want to get out of making this legal case, because marriage cannot be forced upon anybody. But let's say that under the pretext of sex, the boyfriend or whoever has actually asked for money, asked for housing, asked for all of that, then there is a way to maneuver that into a case of cheating and try and attempt to get those aspects back. So I would say that it would differ case to case.
Okay, and then thank you. There's another question in the chat. Is it considered as violence if a woman is verbally abused, gaslighted, and emotionally blackmailed almost on a regular basis by her partner to an extent that she starts feeling suicidal or engages in self-harm?
Absolutely, there is no doubt. And they do not have to be a multiplicity of episodes. A single episode where I feel I am completely violated is enough for me to say that this is violence. I mean, it does not have to be X number of episodes of gaslighting against me for me to be able to say this is violence.
Thank you. Snehalji, if you would like to ask your question.
Yeah, so ma'am, are there any studies about development or mental health issues in the children of the families facing gender-based violence and how to address it, or like some plans or policies?
Sure. So in fact, I think about last week or very recently, there are guidelines that have been released for how to deal with children who have either themselves survived abuse or have witnessed abuse. And I'm not able to, for some reason, recall them, whether they're the World Health Organization guidelines. I'll look that up. I would say that there are studies on children about the impact of living and seeing violence happen in their own homes. Right? So those kinds of studies are there. There are lots of studies by Nimhans, I would say, which are done on this, and one could refer to that. However, the studies in India do not show an association between if I am a boy and I have seen my parents, have arguments and my father being abusive to my mother, then I become a violent person as I grow up as an adult. Those associations have not been seen in the Indian context, simply because I think in the Indian context, spanking, hitting children, disciplining them, generally violating people physically and so on is a cultural norm in the Indian families. Unlike, I would say, a little bit in the West, where there is a lot of literature to say that children who are exposed to domestic violence consistently then eventually become abusers. That kind of data and evidence is emerging from the Western, especially high-income countries. But there isn't similar evidence over here. Yeah, it can play a contributory role, but one cannot conclude that they actually become abusers at the end of the day. But I will try and locate the Nimhan study as well as the recent guidelines of WHO and send it to the IMPRI team.
Thank you, ma'am.
Jap Noorji, if you would like to go next.
Jab Turka, yeah.
Okay.
I've read the question. So, I mean, of course, there's no doubt. And I think, as the previous speaker, Varudhini mentioned, it's critical for therapists and counselors who respond to survivors of gender-based violence, have supportive supervision, have time out, because vicarious trauma may creep into their own lives. And they must have a space to be able to debrief. That is something that is critical on a regular basis, I would say, for people engaged in these interventions.
Thank you. Samprikta ji. I can read out the question. Young and privileged kids, usually boys, harbor thoughts and opinions that are anti-feminist. How do we tackle this at a school level?
No, sorry,
Yes,
I couldn't quite.
Okay, so I'm practicing as a school counselor. So usually in adolescent children and usually boys, the concept of reverse sexism is something that's very trendy, and with a few questionable movies which are made very accessible, the concept of alpha male and the normalcy of violence, and perceiving themselves as yes, appropriately as a victim of patriarchy, but questioning the wrong people and harboring furthermore resentment towards the other genders, including women and the people from the LGBTQ community, or the other marginalized. So how do we tackle this? Because I'm sorry I'm taking so much time, but recently I just had a 7th grader walk up to me and ask that, ma'am, there is a problem, and do you believe in gender equality? So my very automatic response was, yes, I'm a feminist, I do believe it. And he had a very big face palm that I no, you're not the right person then. So and he's one of these guys are really the smartest in the lot. And coming from privileged backgrounds, how do we address this? Because I believe that education is a tool, and if we, the privileged people, do not take this up, I don't know who else will. So kindly help me in addressing
So,
these.
Samprikta, thank you for your question. Children always challenge us, I think, and challenge the notions we have. There won't be a one-time solution, Samprikta. The point is, feminist, the F word itself is a taboo, and I think that needs to be demystified. Everybody can be a feminist. Everybody that believes in gender equity, that everyone should have equal access to resources, that power has to be dismantled, cannot be in the hands of few, but must be equitably distributed. If that's the belief system, then we are all feminists, and we stand up as much as against against violence faced by men, violence faced, rapes against men, especially, in situations of armed conflicts, in situations of custodial torture, where men are often subjected to it more so than women. So I think these examples of speaking about the fact that men face violence, but in what context, and gender-based violence against sexual minorities or women in what context, and that we stand against all kinds of violence. But I would suggest that, there are lots of animated videos for younger children on understanding what is feminism.
Right.
And those are some things that could be introduced maybe in classes of value education and so on, because these are so slow processes. And there's an organization called Breakthrough. If you actually go to their website, they are embedding gender concerns in school education. And they're training a lot of teachers around, I think, North India, Bihar, and so on. But they have a lot of interactive videos on the website, and please feel free to look at those. There are also samples of how one carries out these shorter modules with younger people. Because they are the future of tomorrow for us.
Exactly.
When
We
Nirantar, Nirantar's website, Nirantar, they also work with
Nirantar, yeah,
Nirantar.
absolutely.
Delhi organized. They also have a very dynamic website. You can download their material freely.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you so much, all of you. And to be honest,
Another one is Must Bowl. Must Bowl is by Delhi University boys. They are changing the gender stereotypes in a day-to-day life. And these are the boys who are running that.
Yeah, I think that would become a very good role modeling for young boys, seeing
And
that
also MAVA,
representation.
Man Against Violence and Abuse. There
Right.
also, they also have a lot of educational material. They work with schools and colleges also. But Master Ball is hilarious. They're short videos of 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And how on a day-to-day basis, these kids, they are all students, undergraduate students who are running it.
Thank you so much for the resources. I would definitely tap into those. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to answer Chitra's question, whether lives has been taught to Ashas. I have a principal problem with burdening Ashas. Asha workers are volunteers. They are not full-time workers. Neither are they employees of the formal health system. I think just about everything under the sun is dumped on them. They don't have equal pay. They also belong to the same physical and geographical community. So the minute they're going to start talking about violence, there is a possibility that they may also be subjected to it. So my word would be to be extremely cautious. Tell Ashas about services that are available in different places. They can provide that information. But really, when we are working with the health system, it has to start on the top of the hierarchy, which is the doctors and nurses. Because they are in a position of power and they can command that kind of time as well. So I would definitely say let's tread the Asha bit very carefully unless we have the adequate infrastructure and make them a part of the formal health system.
Okay, but just one thing I would like to ask, because I agree with you that Asha should not be burdened, but the module 8 it talks about
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
it's an excellent module, created by under NRHM, under NHM, and it has been created by an excellent feminist organization called Jagori. Right. But my point is that their role in it has been mentioned as identification. And Seha definitely believes that active identification should not be done by Asha workers in the course of their work, on health camps, creating awareness. If there is disclosure, you definitely tell them about where the services are available.
Okay.
So in fact, we are currently testing out what is it that Ashas can do in the arena of violence against women. And it's a randomized controlled trial, ma'am. So once the results are out, we will be able to definitely say what works or what does not.
And even without they being told to do this work, women
They
are
are
the first point contact in the community. Women are telling. In fact, if you read the Makam Sahat study, what all transpired during the lockdown, they were approaching only Ashas and Anganwadi workers, though it was beyond. They were overburdened with so much COVID-related work, and they were the ones who contacted the women's rights organization, and they were passing on the information for.
So you mean to say that they can be early referrals, kind of referral?
Currently they are, or even when it is not part of their job description, they are. Women approach because they are totally helpless. There is nobody with them except for these two Ashas and Anganwadi.
I think we should create resource directories so that Ashas at least have access to resources where they can refer women.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. We have one last question from Renu ji. Would you like to go next?
No, with all the talk in that is going on, I have one question in my mind that, in fact, you have answered a bit of that, but still the question is in my mind that so much support system to the accused is available when the thing has happened. We have counseled her. Okay, what is the situation? How is it? What kind of a help is available once the accused has to face the culprit again? Means the same workplace is there, the person has been suspended, brought again, you are also continuing there. That feeling, that way, what kind of a support, or how does these agencies help there? Because she has to continuously face that person, or maybe within the same vicinity area they are there. So is this service or support system available in the long run, or is it a one-time factor?
Yeah, thank you very much, Renuji. You have actually pointed the exact gap in the system, because a trial is something that goes on for a minimum of 1 or 2 years. And, the survivor has to live with the consequences. If there is punishment, it's fine. If there is acquittal. So she has to live with both of it. Unfortunately, though we have a huge funding under the finance ministry called the Nirbhaya funds, which was supposed to be dedicated for everything that is related to survivors of gender-based violence, and more so rape. So, but we don't have a very clear, we have witness protection system, but actually change of residence, new set of employment, being able to report as a Jane Doe case where I can report my rape, but my name should not be revealed anywhere. Those systems have not been created at all in the Indian context. So as you said that, it is really left for the civil society organizations to enable the survivor to navigate her life. The police, the courts, the community, her workplace, probably, if she decides to get married, all of these questions are some things that women have. Like there are rape survivors, who had the courage to disclose about a rape much later when she was pregnant. And then there was an abortion. And women ask us these questions. Will the scar be seen? Will they come to know that I'm a rape survivor? There is no system to really assist them to deal with the aftermath. And like I said, that all of it is left to civil society organizations and NGOs, to help the women navigate the system after rape. So that is a huge gap as far as the current system is concerned.
Okay,
They have asked for the link for the book of the rape survivors.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a Routledge book. Can I send it to?
Oh, yeah, it is there on Sehat.
the
Just share the Sehat website. So
Okay,
then
okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll send you all the links to all the 3 books also.
And even Sehat website, you can write in the chat box.
Sure.
Because the moment you open the website, that book is there. You can see the cover of the book. Yeah, correct.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we have no more questions now. It was a pleasure having you with us, and we hope to see you at future IMPRI events as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Now I would like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to give the chair's closing remarks.
Yeah, I think learnings of all 3 days sessions are that civil society and state should provide more and more opportunities to all citizens of all age group and all genders for self-actualization so that they can achieve higher level of mental well-being. For too many people who face marginalization and exclusion, experience of self-worth or competence, autonomy, economic independence, and physical, sexual, and emotional safety and security, it is so essential for good mental health and are systematically denied because of their socio-cultural economic locations in our society. Respect for diversity, plurality, multicultural outlook that ensure democratic and tolerant milieu is very important, because this democracy in interpersonal relationship also results in less psychological, emotional, physical, sexual, or economic violence. So as compared to institutionalization based mainly on a biomedical intervention, community or family-based rehabilitation, which is based on human touch for mentally distressed people, is far more effective. I would like to end with the verses so beautifully penned by Marsha Forrest, and I quote, "Inclusion is future. Inclusion is opposite of exclusion. Inclusion is no boycott. Inclusion is battle cry. Challenge to the parents. Child's cry for his or her existence. for welcome, for embrace, to be remembered fondly, for award, for gift of love that like surprise, like treasure. Inclusion is trend, such as democracy, freedom and justice for all. All means all, no buts about it. Inclusion means clean game, general knowledge, courtesy, hard work. Inclusion is great in its simplicity and surprising in its complexity. Instead of investing in jails and mental asylums and hospitals and refugee camps, to canalize the resources for creating true homes, true life, true human beings for humanizing life. And I'm really happy that all of us are working together in this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We will now be having a feedback session, so participants can do so by unmuting themselves. Tamagni ji, if you would want to go next, since you are unmuted.
Yeah, so I think it was a really enriching session for all of us. We got a platform
Hello?
to, we got a platform to share not just our personal experiences, but also learn from so many experts who have been working in this field, uh, gain a lot of insights from their practical experience. So it was a good learning experience, good immersive experience, and it was extremely cathartic for me, where I have not just learned and unlearned, but the process was extremely cathartic for me personally.
For all of us, it was extremely good. Thank you.
Thank you. Malaji, if you can go ahead. Your hand is raised. Okay. Anvisha Banerjee ji, Dr. Anvisha ji.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It was an eye-opener. I come from a literature background, but I can see very many interconnectedness regarding literature, some of the stories, pain of partition, trauma. These things are undercurrents which we read and teach students. But looking at this focused manner, it has really helped me enrich my knowledge as well as general awareness. We being as women, we know very less of our rights also. It was a great enriching session from pole to pole, if I might put it that way. It was a great experience for me, and thank you, IMPRI, for bringing up this platform. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
So for me, it was almost similar to everybody else, but for me, I got a lot of validation of what work I was doing, what I was thinking, and I think that would help me to further plan my own journey in this path. Thank you very much. And I would like to connect to everybody if possible. So please let me know how can that is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A participants list has been shared with you with all the details of the participants.
Oh, great. That's great.
Thank you. So, Brismita ji, if you would like to go ahead.
Can I speak?
Yes,
Hello?
yes,
Yeah.
please.
So all 3 days were full of like information, insights, research-based references, and lots of learning we had. So very enriching experience as such. Many takeaways are there specific to considering where I wish to work and everything. Even the question answer sessions were so good, and thanks for like extending the time limit every day, and everybody was so engaged into it. Thanks for that. I wish that these videos are available for at least few days. I don't know like how it will work, but please inform us like so that we will just go through them like once or twice. Because some points we miss, some questions we miss in between. So please just let us know about it. And yes, all the faculties are so wonderful with their knowledge and everything. Overwhelming experience empathetic as well as, practical. So lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The video has been shared with you, ma'am. It'll be available for a fortnight from the day of the session. So all
Sure.
video.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Caroline G, if you would like to go next.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, this was I personally didn't have much experiences in the mental health practice, but like I was in some of my professional practices, I got the opportunity to work, but I didn't have a much theoretical knowledge. That was one reason which I came here. So it was a purely infused. All the sessions were purely infused and engaging sessions. So it was a great experience. And yeah, Vibhuti ma'am, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yagna ji, if you would like to go next.
Yes, thank you for giving us the opportunity to attend this session because the all 3 days were really very informative. And for me, I have been in the sector for many years, but this mental health was a new topic for me. I did not have much information on it. So this training was very useful in terms of understanding the mental health from a various lenses and with intersectionality, of course, with gender and then with what kind of counseling treatments the mental health treatments works and what kind of strategies we can work around. So very, very useful trainings, and thank you once again.
Thank you. Samrikta ji, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I would like to thank the organizers and all the team of all the speakers over the 3 days. And it has been a great, great, great time of learning, knowing things from multiple perspectives, and also has been a very reaffirming experience where at times we do end up questioning ourselves: are we doing the right thing? Are we on the right path? Are we able to even make a difference? So this 3 days did help me understand that yes, at least kuch to I am doing that is making sense, and somehow trying to make things a little easier for people from minority genders, as well as ensuring that how we can make a community that encourages fuller living for each one, irrespective of your gender, irrespective of where you come from, your choices and preferences. So thank you so much. It has been a great experience learning from each one, the panelists as well as all the participants who've shared their experiences and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, lovely Srivastava ji, Titra ji, Sangeeta ji, and Arushi ji for all the positive feedback in the comments, and Snehal ji. It was a pleasure having all of you with us today. If there is no more feedback, then I think we can move to the end of the session. Yes. Yes, sir.
I just have to just add, I think, one comment and one suggestion, please. I'm Ramesh, and I think we delved deeply into the subjects. I mean, discussed subject matter as professionally. For me, it was a more of a professional approach of by all the speakers and experts who spoke and discussed the case studies and delved into the subject matter. And I have a suggestion that can we in future, in the very near future, have a session on mental health vis-a-vis children. How not just school children but generally children, and how we are really able being to cope up with the challenges we have post COVID, and of course with variety of sections and subsections into children. And yeah, this is just my suggestion that if you can really come up with a session or as immersive as it has been in the past 3 days, so highly enriching and great place to really network and communicate and share our feelings and I'm really thankful for you to give me the chance to attend it, and I'm looking forward to attend more and yeah, take the suggestion if possible about children and mental health and their mental health well-being. Thank you so much.
Excellent suggestion. I think we are in touch with child rights organization who are doing very, very important work. I have myself been a volunteer of an organization called Sneha Sadan, and I think we can very much contact them and bring them also in the discourse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your feedback. Yes, so we're grateful to all who've been part of today's event as we come to the end of day 3 of Gender and Mental Health, an online international winter school program, a 3-day immersive online certificate training course. I, Ramanathan Arora, researcher, IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. We are grateful to our experts for day 3, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, Dr. Varudhini Kankipati ji, Ms. Sangeeta Rege ji, for taking out their valuable time and giving an opportunity to the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberations. Readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared with you for your learning. We would like to thank all our participants and experts for the last 3 days who have contributed to the vibrant discussion and helped make this 3-day course a success. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in the future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
I have already written this website, given the web address of Sehat, from where you can download the storybook. The Sehat publication, you can see this, it's here.
Ma'am, there's one more question in the chat. I think Malaji's been trying to ask it for a bit. She wants to know if there are any games for teenage girls so as to make them open up about their day-to-day feelings. Yes.
Nirantar and Breakthrough, both of them have games for teenage girls. Even UNESCO has also come up. UNICEF also has several games. And some of the stories and games which Kamala Basin had written, they are also in the Sangat and Jagori website. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Feedback form will be shared after the session, and so will the certificates within 1 week. So I would request you to fill it up. Thank you so much all for joining us today.
Thank you, Ram, for anchoring it so beautifully and democratically.